When I got hired, I thought the strangest thing about the ranch was the pay. Then I met the priest. They were offering $8,000 for a 2-week cattle drive. I'd been roping and riding my entire life, and even the biggest outfits I'd worked for had never come close to paying that much. I figured they were desperate. Turns out, they were. I still remember walking up to the foreman for the first time. As I approached, he leaned against a weathered fence, watching riders break in some fresh horses. He turned to face me. He was a large man with a thick beard and weathered features. "You lost, son?" his deep, dry voice said. I shook my head. "No, sir. Heard you need some riders." He stared at me and clenched his jaw. "That depends. Can you ride?" "Yes, sir." "Can you rope?" "Yes, sir." "Who've you worked for?" I told him the last 3 ranches I had worked for. He nodded. "Good outfits, all of them. They don't keep dead weight." He slowly stroked his beard. "Well, alright. We do need one more rider. Go on and drop your stuff in the bunkhouse. We leave tomorrow." The next day, everyone in the bunkhouse was up and ready to go an hour before the sun rose. There were 6 of us, 4 ranch hands, another Howard cowboy, and me. The foreman Mike entered the bunkhouse and brought us together. "Alright, listen up. We're going up the pass. Should be there tomorrow night. Some of you know what that means. Those who don't, just know it ain't your business. We're paying you to work, not ask questions." Our eyes locked for a moment as he said this. "Go saddle up," he said with authority. We did just that. An hour later, the sun was beginning to peek over the distant mountains, and we stood waiting with our horses. Mike walked by and I took the moment to ask a question. "Hey Mike," I said as I matched his walk. "I thought we were pushing cattle. Where's the herd?" He stopped and pointed with a nod to the far corral. I looked and saw 2 lone cows standing in the pen. Looking back to Mike, I said, "That's it? 2 cows? You need 6 cowboys to push 2 cows?" He got real close to my face and stared me in the eyes for a moment before saying, "Ain't your place to ask questions, got it?" His voice was vicious. I swallowed, lowered my eyes to the ground and nodded. "Yeah, I got it." The 7 of us stood around as the sun rose. We were waiting for someone, but I didn't know who. Moments later, a lone figure approached us from behind the bunkhouse. It was a young man, probably no older than me. He was cleanly shaven and manicured, dressed in a dark all-black suit with the white square of a clerical collar standing out against his neck. When I saw him, I snickered to myself and elbowed the older man next to me, whose name was Bill. "Looks like we got ourselves a preacher," I whispered with a chuckle. "Show some damn respect," he snarled back. Bill was a ranch employee and was clearly unimpressed with my humor. The priest walked over to Mike and met his handshake with both hands. "I'm very sorry, I didn't intend to be late," he said. "It's alright, Father Martin. We couldn't start without you anyhow," Mike said in a tone of reverence he hadn't had before. Father Martin nodded. "I trust my horse is ready?" "Yes, Father, right beside the barn. Follow me." He looked past Father Martin to us. "The rest of you, get the cows on the trail. We'll catch up." As we moved down the trail, I pulled my horse alongside the only younger member of our group besides the priest. Will smiled at me as I did. "Always good to be out on the range, ain't it?" He chuckled. "Yeah, sure is," I replied before following up with, "Hey, who's the priest?" "Oh, Father Martin?" Will said. "He's the town's new vicar. Came from Virginia if I remember right. Just started here a few months ago after old Father Jenkins passed. God rest his soul. Okay, I was puzzled. But why is he out here with us? At that, Will's cheery disposition soured. He was silent for a while before saying, "That ain't exactly for me to say." Before I could reply, he coldly said, "Excuse me." And with that, he sped his horse up and moved further down the trail. We rode in silence for the next 2 hours. The trail grew more rugged as the day went on. As we grew closer to the base of the mountains, it felt as if we had gone back 100 years. The land felt young and unspoiled. At mid-morning, we stopped by a small creek to water the horses. Before long, Mike and Father Martin could be seen approaching in the distance. As they grew closer, it became clear that Father Martin didn't know what he was doing. He appeared uncomfortable with both the horse and the scenery. He rode as if the only experience he had was old cowboy movies. I couldn't help but roll my eyes and mutter, "Great, now he'll slow us down." When I looked at the other riders, I was surprised to see that they didn't share my disdain. Instead, they were grateful, even reverent to the inexperienced rider. Rejoining the group, Mike took command. "Okay," he declared. "We're about to pass the line. From here on out, no more talking. Not until we make camp and get a fire going. Got it?" The riders murmured in agreement. Mike's eyes met mine, and I slowly nodded in acknowledgement. We continued in single file. Mike led, the priest followed, and I brought up the rear. Moments later, we passed through a worn gate that stood across the path. No fence could be found on either side. Once through the gate, the world seemed different. It seemed quiet. The howling sound of the wind was gone, and there was no chirping of birds. The only sound was the clicking steps of the horses. We continued for hours. I could feel myself zoning out. Normally, there's small talk and wisecracks on these sorts of rides. The quietness made me drowsy. "Can you help me?" The strangely happy voice broke the silence and shook me from the daze I had sunk into. I quickly looked from side to side, seeing nothing but thick pines uphill and barren plains downhill. I turned my horse and circled back around. Someone had called for help. My concern for a lost hiker or wayward child pushed common sense from my mind. The words escaped my mouth before I could stop them. "Hello? Are you okay?" My words seemed to echo in the quietness, but were soon drowned out by the deafening crack of a nearby gunshot. Instantly, I turned to the source of the sound. It was Mike. His rifle was raised above his head, and a thin trail of smoke escaped the barrel. His eyes were white with rage, and he raised a lone finger to his lips. Father Martin looked from Mike to me and back, his face caked in fear, though I couldn't tell if it was from my actions or Mike's gunshot. Mike violently ushered me to move up in the line. He positioned me between the priest and himself before kicking his horse into a jogging pace. We continued at a fast pace for a few hours until we reached a flat area on the mountainside. It was there that Mike dismounted and signaled for us to set up camp. After we had each pitched a canvas tent and laid out our bedrolls, Mike formed a fire pit, and gathering some wood, he soon had a fire going. Once the fire was roaring, Mike stood up and quickly knocked me to the ground with a swift right hook. Pulling my face from the dirt, I turned to him as he rolled up his sleeves. "What the hell?" I screamed. He stood over me. "You're going to get us all killed if you don't listen to what I say." He reached a helping hand to me. "You're lucky it was just a punch. It could have been worse. I need you to pay attention out here." Though I was still a bit angry, I grasped his hand and he pulled me up. He patted my shoulder and turned to the rest of the group. "All right, the sun will be setting soon, and the good father already knows that he'll be on watch through the night, and we'll be taking shifts to watch with him. Got it?" The men nodded in agreement, and Mike turned to me. "You're on first watch." He tossed a lever-action rifle to me. Best stay alert. As the sky grew darker, the mood grew lighter. Soon we were talking and laughing as we sat around the fire, eating our supper. As the hours passed, so did the men. Each one moved in his own time to his tent, and soon all that remained was Father Martin and me. The priest and I sat on opposite sides of the fire. A rifle lay across my lap, and a book rested on his. The only noise in the dark of the night was the crackle of the fire. Father Martin stared intently at the book on his lap. I watched as he turned each page, before finally breaking the silence. "Is that the Bible?" He looked up and shook his head. "No, it's a history of sorts." "Of what?" "This place." My eyes shifted to the fire for a moment, before returning to the priest. "What does it say?" He closed the book and looked me in the eye. "Well, it was written by my predecessor, Father Jenkins. He tried to record the happenings of this place and the importance of the ride we're currently on." I thought for a moment. "Is it helpful?" He slowly shook his head. "No, most of it is the ramblings and superstitions of a tired old man." I nodded, pretending to understand. The two of us stared at the fire in silence for several minutes before I said, "Father, what's really going on here?" He continued to stare into the flames. "I wish I knew. Up until this afternoon, I thought this rite was just some strange local tradition, and maybe if I humored the ranchers, I'd gain some respect in the community, and maybe some more church members." His eyes shifted to me. "But now I don't know what to think. And the truth is, Father Jenkins didn't know much, and even the Vatican doesn't fully understand what is happening here." I chuckled a little. "Well then, why do they need you?" "I'm here for protection. From what? I do not know. Mike told me that usually just the presence of a priest is enough. But if not, he told me Father Jenkins had some prayers written down." "Did you find the prayers?" He slowly nodded. "I think so." "Father, this is also..." "Hello?" A loud, sweet yet sorrowful voice interrupted me. The priest and I both looked to the source of the voice. In the darkness, just beyond the boundaries of the fire's light was a dark, small figure. It stood unmoving as we watched. "Can you help me?" The figure then began to snuffle and cry. Almost automatically, Father Martin stood up and walked a few feet closer. I cautiously stood and followed behind. Now closer, we could see that the shape was a child, a young girl, looking no older than 8. Her feet were bare, and dirt covered her hands and face. She wore an old-fashioned dress, like what you would see in old pictures of the pioneers. A thin trail of tears flowed down her face. Father Martin seemed to forget where he was, and instinctively he wanted to help. "Don't cry, my child," he said sympathetically. "Are you alright? How can we help?" The girl choked back tears and weakly said, "My pa is hurt real bad. He's just over the ridge. Please come with me and help." The priest smiled warmly. "Of course, my child. Just allow me to grab a flashlight." He turned towards the tent, and as he did, I placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Father, don't." The look on my face was enough to remind Father Martin where we were. At first, he looked ashamed, and then his face hardened with resolve. He turned back towards the figure. "Child, if you truly are in need, may God send someone to help you. But I cannot leave this fire," he said in a shaking voice. Growing shadows hid the child's face from our view. It stood there staring at us before finally blankly saying, "You won't help me?" Father Martin slowly put his hand into his pocket and removed a small wooden cross that he now held by his side. He shook his head. "I will not." "What kind of priest won't help a child in need?" the figure said. Father Martin swallowed hard and replied, "What kind of monster hides itself as a child?" A deep, twisted laugh echoed from the figure, which was now completely obscured by shadow. The priest raised the cross towards the shape, and with a shaking voice, he said, "You are not welcome here. Leave now." The child's voice was gone. In its place was a deep, creaking voice. "I have walked these valleys since before your churches had names, before your roads, before your fathers' fathers knew these mountains existed. The land knows me. The mountains know my presence. They know my scent. They do not know you." Father Martin swallowed hard. His eyes never left the thing in front of us. "That may be true," he whispered. "But we are here now." His hand tightened around the crucifix. "So be gone." The shape came closer, stopping just short of the reach of firelight. There it stood, seeming so much taller, and though it was closer to the light, it was darker than night. "The flame will not protect you forever. When it fails, I will find you." Father Martin began frantically muttering Hail Marys under his breath. The moments that followed felt like an eternity, but soon the figure said, "See you soon, priest." Then it stepped back into the shadows and was gone. The woods fell silent. Then somewhere beyond the trees, a child laughed. The rest of the night we had no more visitors, though in the distance we could see shadowy shapes passing in the dark. In the morning we shared everything with Mike. He nodded soberly and told us, "We just need to get these cows to the summit." As the fire went out, we returned to silence and packed camp, and soon we were back on the trail upward. The terrain grew more difficult, and the going was slow as the horses struggled over loose rock and steep grades. It wasn't even midday when it happened. Father Martin's horse went into a panic when its feet slipped slightly. The inexperienced priest tried his best to hold on, but the startled horse threw its rider. Father Martin flew from the mound and landed hard on the rocky ground. His head landed first, then the rest of him. A loud snap was heard. Mike and I were the first to reach him. His head was bent back far enough to touch his back. He was dead. Fear and sadness filled Mike's face. A low, "Damn it," escaped his lips before he covered his mouth, realizing what he had done. Breaking his own rule, he said, "Screw it, we got no choice. We have to finish the ride." The rest of us were silent. Bill and I lifted the priest's lifeless body onto the back of my horse, laying him on his stomach with his legs on one side and head and arms on the other. Nobody spoke. The only sound was Father Martin's horse snorting as it paced in circles. Mike finally removed the crucifix from the priest's pocket and slipped it into his own pocket. We continued. The sun was beginning to set as we reached the summit. We pitched our tents and set a fire. Near our camp was an old hitching post covered in strange carvings. Mike directed Will and me to hitch the 2 cows to it. He followed us over, holding the priest's book. He flipped through it, stopping at a page in the back. "I hope this is the right one," he muttered. Then with one hand on the hitching post, he stumbled his way through the old Latin prayer. Gathering the group together, Mike said, "Fellas, without the priest, we need to remain as quiet as possible tonight. Every one of us needs to remain in our tents and pray to God that they accept the offering." Night fell, and every man cowered alone in his tent. From the entrance of mine, I saw the fire shrink as a steady rain began to fall. I couldn't sleep. At around midnight, I heard a childlike hum make its way through the forest. It stopped just before entering the clearing, as if it was unsure if it could continue. The fire grew weaker. The hum grew closer. Peeking out of the flaps of my tent, I saw the same little girl that I did the night before. She walked through the camp, humming to herself. "Where did the priest go?" she said mockingly to herself. "Oh." She stopped by the horse carrying Father Martin's corpse. "There he is," she laughed to herself. She snapped one of his fingers from his hands as if it were nothing and began chewing on it like a carrot. "Is anyone home?" she joked to herself as she grew closer to the tents. She walked in front of every tent, making her way around the circle. I gasped loudly as she stopped right in front of mine. "Hello? Is anyone in there?" came a far too cheerful voice. "May I come in?" I held my breath. "Okay, I'm coming in." With that, a small but powerful hand split apart the tent flaps and grabbed me by the collar, throwing me out of the tent and across the camp until my arm and side collided with a large pine. Falling to the ground, I screamed out in pain as the snap of bones came from my left arm. The little girl was walking towards me. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" A wide smile split across her face as she drew closer. Just before she reached me, a loud crack echoed in the night, followed instantly by a loud, inhuman scream coming from the girl. She whirled around to see Mike standing at the entrance of his tent, his smoking lever action pointed right at her. "That's far enough," Mike's strong voice said. "You ain't welcome here. Now leave." The child chuckled and walked towards him. Mike fired. It had no effect. He fired again. Still nothing. The girl grabbed the barrel of the gun, yanking it from his hands. She then used it like a bat, swinging the stock of the rifle violently at Mike's head. After 3 hits, his body fell to the ground. She grabbed the leg and quickly dragged him off into the night. As she disappeared, dozens of other dark, vaguely human shapes sprang from the woods and tore the tents and men to shreds. I heard my friends scream and beg for their lives, but the creatures didn't care. It was a feeding frenzy. The dark shapes grabbed what flesh they could, fighting amongst themselves for the scraps. As they were distracted by the remains of my crew, I slowly crawled my way to the nearest horse, the one carrying Father Martin. The horse neighed slightly as I mounted it, and I winced in pain. They noticed that. I sped down the trail, but they followed. I raced down the trail, the horse and I moving in tandem, both driven by fear and a desire to live. The things followed us, dozens of inhuman screams mixed with human pleas for us to stop and help them filled the air. As we left the mountains and entered the plains, the horse began to tire. Father Martin was weighing us down. I twisted around in the saddle and cut the ropes that secured the holy man. He rolled unceremoniously off and plopped onto the ground. The herd behind us devoured the body like a pack of ravenous wolves. The sun was rising when the ranch came into view. I kept going, riding into the nearest town. I ditched the horse for a rental car. I'm writing this down from a hotel room just outside of Bozeman. My flight leaves in 3 hours. I don't know if I can make it to the airport. I'm scared to leave the room. For the last hour, there has been knocking at the door, and the voice of Father Martin keeps repeating, "Hello? Are you okay? Please, let me in." Don't ever go near national parks, especially if you have kids. 4 months ago, I moved my family to a small mountain town in the Rocky Mountain region. The town sits right on the border of a famous national park. In fact, our backyard opens directly into the park. For a while, it was a dream come true. My wife and I loved the views and enjoyed hiking nearly every day. And our 2 young boys loved exploring and playing in the woods on the park borders. Something is wrong with this place. I didn't understand that when we moved here. I do now. About 2 months after the move, I started seeing them. The signs. It started slow. The first one I saw was plastered on the automatic glass door of the local grocery store. But now, they are everywhere. They all say the same thing. September 7th to 14th, Annual Week of Remembrance. National Park closed. No one will be permitted inside. I didn't think much about it as I entered the grocery store, though I mentioned it to my wife when we returned to the car. "Did you see that flyer? I wonder what that week of remembrance is." She said. "Probably some local celebration." I shrugged. "I guess so. Just seems weird that they would close the park for a week. That's a big hit to business. Isn't that a Labor Day weekend?" "I'm sure they have their reasons." If only I knew what I know now. From then on, it seemed like every time we went into town, there were new signs on random businesses, on every church and government building. Before long, the signs were everywhere. My wife and I were driving through town on our way to pick up the boys from their first day at school. The strange sign I saw in every window and every street corner filled my mind. "Have you noticed how few kids there are?" my wife asked. "What?" Her question caught me off guard. "Well, think about it. The town is nearly 5,000 people, and we have the only elementary school in the area, and I've barely seen any kids." I stared down the road, pondering her observation. I asked the boys' teacher this morning. Her voice was a little lower. She said there's only 10 kids in the boys' grade, and only 95 in the whole school. Doesn't that seem odd? I shrugged. It's a tourist town. Maybe people aren't here to have family. "I guess," she said as she chewed on her lip. We pulled up to the school. Our boys and their teacher stood by the curb. My wife and I parked and hopped out. "Hi, Miss Johnson. Is everything all right?" my wife asked with concern. The teacher smiled. "Yes, everything is wonderful. Your boys were just little angels today." She handed my wife a yellow paper. "I'm just here to give you this. The school wanted every parent to get one." And with a practiced smile, she said, "Have a lovely day," and briskly walked back towards the school building. My wife stared at the paper and frowned before handing it to me. All it said was, "Remembrance Week, September 7th to 14th. Protect your children." We looked at each other confused. My wife whispered, "What is this?" I tightened my jaw and looked around for the boys' teacher. By now, she was long gone, but my eyes came to rest on another parent and her daughter who looked to be the same age as the boys. I briskly walked towards her. "Excuse me, ma'am?" She looked startled as I approached. "Yes?" "Hi, my sons attend here, and their teacher gave us this." I showed her the poster. "Do you know what it's all about?" She stiffened slightly as her eyes quickly glanced at the paper in my hand and back to me. "The park is no place for a child. Protect your children," she whispered before tightening the grip on her daughter's hand and walking away. "What did she say?" my wife asked. I shrugged. Nothing helpful. We got home, and as my wife and sons settled on the couch for a family movie, I found myself in the bedroom. Typing the phrase Remembrance Day along with the name of the town into my laptop's search engine, I stared at the unhelpful results. There seemed to be nothing, no articles, no backstory, not so much as a Facebook post that tied the phrase to the town in any meaningful way. I switched tactics and typed in the national park and the dates September 7th to 14th. The national park website confirmed that the park was indeed closed during that week, but the website claimed that it was for planned maintenance. I stared frustrated at the computer screen. "Dad?" The voice of my son Aaron rescued me from the unfruitful search. "Are you going to watch the movie with us?" With a nod, I closed the computer and said, "Sure thing, buddy." The start of the movie pushed the strange poster out of my mind. The next afternoon, my wife picked up the boys while I stayed home to catch up on work. I always enjoyed working on the backyard porch. The view of the untouched wilderness of the park paired with the sounds of nature helped me concentrate. It was one of the main reasons I wanted to move out here. After about 15 minutes of answering emails and updating spreadsheets, the woods fell silent. The change caused me to glance up from the laptop to the world around me. The sound of the wind had disappeared, though I still could feel it. The birds were silent. The wild land before me was as quiet as could be. It was like watching a muted video of the woods. I looked around. A strange feeling filled me. I held my breath and didn't move. It felt as though making the slightest noise would break some unspoken rule. I sat there frozen for what felt like an eternity. Then, from the hills just beyond my property, a loud snap of a breaking twig echoed in the silence. Then another. And another. Something was walking, and all of nature quietly beheld its journey. It moved along the land that passed in front of my home. I looked, trying to find the source of the steps, maybe a hiker or a rarely seen large animal, but I couldn't tell what it was. It moved in deep underbrush, and even as I watched intently, I only caught glances of something dark and large. As the steps moved past the area of my land, it was like the world came alive again. The wind and chirping of birds returned. The silence was gone, and so were the steps. Standing up, I stared where I last heard the steps. Must have been a moose, I muttered to myself. Soon my family got home. I greeted them at the door, asking my boys how their day was and what they learned at school. Before long, we all sat down for dinner. I saw a moose from the porch today, I said. Whoa, said Aaron. That's so cool, my youngest son Peter replied. My wife looked at me amused. Yeah, it walked right by the backyard, I continued. Will you take us hiking tomorrow? Yeah, maybe we can find it. I smiled. As long as you two get your homework done. The boys and I tossed the football around in the backyard, and then we all settled down for a movie to close the night out. It was late, well after 2 a.m. when a single word pulled me out of sleep. Dad? I popped awake, quickly blinking the sleep from my eyes. In the open door of my bedroom stood Peter. He quietly sniffled to himself. Peter was wrong. He stumbled through his words. Someone is watching me from the windows. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. What? He's watching me from the hill. I quickly rose from the bed and followed my son to his room. Peter's room faces the national park, with a large pane window that overlooks the untouched hills hulking over our home. We hadn't yet bought a blind for the large window, and the moonlight illuminated the tall pines and exposed boulders that dotted the hillside. He's gone, Peter whispered. Where did you last see him? My eyes didn't leave the hillside. He pointed to a little clearing between the trees. Right there. He was looking at me. I looked down at my young son. Genuine fear was caked on his face. I wrapped an arm around him, pulling him close. Have you ever seen him before? He shook his head. No, his face was funny. I nodded slowly as I began to realize this must have been some sort of waking nightmare. Tell you what, how about you go and sleep with Mom, and I'll take your bed for the night. He wiped his nose on his sleeve and replied, Okay, thank you, Dad. Love you, son, I said as I sat down on his bed. Love you too. He walked down the hall. I lay down on the bed. I was awake for a while as I thought through what had just happened. A change in light caught my eye, and I sat up, looking out the window. Near the top of the hill, a warm orb of light moved quickly through the forest, bobbing and weaving around the trees as if it followed some unseen path. Before long, it reached the top of the hill and disappeared beyond the horizon. The next day was the last day of August. Summer was truly over. It didn't take long to forget the previous night's events, and I found myself working hard to wrap up before the boys came home so we'd be ready for our hike. The day flew by, and before I knew it, I was leading two very excited boys down a new trail. I specifically picked a trail that ran near our backyard, so we simply passed through the park markers and walked, and soon landed on the trail. We followed the snake-like path through the woods and up and over many hills. As we began to enter steeper terrain, I began to slow down. It didn't seem to slow down the boys. They quickly passed me and continued down the path. "Don't go too far ahead," I shouted. "Okay," one shouted back, and they rounded a bend in the trail. For a while, I hiked alone, accompanied only by the sound of my heavy breathing. Reaching the top of the ridge, I was discouraged to find out that it had been a false summit. Continuing up the route, I could hear two excited boys just beyond the near corner. The boys came into view, and with enthusiastic shouts, they said, Dad, you got to see this." With that, they ran further down the way. "Hey, wait up, fellas," I chuckled to myself. When I finally caught up with them, I saw what they were excitedly pointing to. A little further up the path, nestled organically on the ridge line, was a fire tower. I stared in awe at the structure as we moved closer to it. Our lust for adventure and exploration made me forget any sense of safety, though I noticed the worn chain link fence and weathered keep out signs. We blew past them, making our way to the base of the tower. It was old. It looked like it was made in the 60s or 70s. Its worn timber legs seemed to barely bear its weight. It was charred and blackened with the scars of wildfire. The metal grated stairs still stood intact. Aaron ran up the first couple of steps and looked back at us with a smile. "Come on," he beckoned. "Careful, it doesn't look safe," I responded. He jumped a few times. The stairway shook a little but held. He grinned. "It's fine. Come on, race you to the top." "No fair," whined Peter as he tried to catch his brother. I smiled to myself as I took a slower approach. The stairs creaked under my weight, but held. Before long, I met my sons at the top. The little cabin was heavily damaged. Like the base, it too was black from fire. Every window was shattered, and the door was off the hinges. Yet, to my surprise, the inside was not empty. A desk with a chair and old manuals and books sat in one corner. A small kitchen still held cans, and in the corner opposite the desk was a cot. To my surprise, this small bed was kept. It looked new, like a perfect replica of a military cot from the 1960s. The rest of the cabin showed signs of age. Layers of dust sat on everything, but not the bed. The boys were taking turns looking through an old pair of binoculars, and I made my way to the desk. I rustled my way through old notebooks and novels. An old calendar caught my eye. It was from the year 1962, opened to September. A large red circle marked out the 7th through the 14th. "I guess Remembrance Week has been going on for a while," I muttered. I poked through a few more things and turned back to the boys. They were now using Aaron's pocket knife to carve their names into one of the crossbeams. "Hey guys, maybe we shouldn't do that. Let's be respectful." Peter just finished his name and Aaron turned to me and said, "There's a lot of names here. I think it's okay." I looked closely at the beam and saw he was right. Dozens of names were carved into the wood, but every name I saw other than Aaron and Peter's had a line crossed through them. As I was looking at the names, Peter, who had been looking out the window, came and pulled on my sleeve. "Dad, I think someone's here," he said in a low voice. I moved to the window, looking down. "Where? I don't see anyone," I whispered. Loud metallic steps arose from beneath us. Clang. Peter grabbed my shirt. Clang. The stairs creaked under something's weight. "On the stairs," Peter murmured. Both boys huddled behind me. I backed away from the door. Clang. The footsteps grew louder and soon reached the top of the stairs. I swallowed hard as the figure appeared in the doorframe. It was a man a little taller than me. His face was cleanly shaven and wore a forced smile. His eyes were small and bead-like. He was clothed in an old-fashioned park ranger's uniform. His eyes locked onto the three of us as he stood in the entry. Behind me, Peter gasped quietly and whispered, "That's the guy who was watching me." The ranger stepped into the cabin. "Sorry folks, but you can't be up here. This is property of the Forest Service. Didn't you see the signs?" His stare was oppressive. My jaw clenched as I replied, "Sorry, we didn't think it was still in use. It looked abandoned." He smirked. "You thought my tower was abandoned?" His tone was light, but his face was hard. "Sorry, we were just leaving." He moved to the side to let me past. I held Aaron's hand and he held his brother's. I had just passed the ranger when he wrapped his hand around my wrist that led Aaron. "The boys stay here." My eyes met his smiling face. He tightened his grip on my wrist. "They have put their names on my tower. They cannot leave. They have given themselves to me." His voice was deep and raspy. As the sun grew low in the sky, the long shadows hid his face from view. "Dad?" Aaron said. I could hear the fear in his voice. "It's okay, son." I glanced down at him. My gaze returned to the ranger's figure. "Get the hell off of me. We're leaving," I said with as much strength as I could muster. At that, the ranger squeezed my wrist so hard that a loud crunch filled the small cabin. I fell to the floor. My mangled wrist hung limply from my arm as I screamed in pain. Through the fog of my own pain, I could hear my sons screaming. It sounded as if they were getting further away. Soon, everything was quiet. Tears formed in my eyes as I held my lifeless wrist. "Look at me." A deep voice broke the silence. I looked up. It was the ranger. His face was hidden in shadow. I could feel myself growing tired as I looked at him. "In a week, you won't even remember them." My vision grew fuzzy as I passed out. When I came to, it was long after sunset. I winced in pain as I looked at my wrist. It was numb and swollen, clearly broken. I quickly looked around the cabin. It was empty. I was alone. I stumbled to my feet. "Aaron? Peter?" I screamed my son's name into the night, but no response came. They were gone. The only evidence that they had ever been there was Aaron's pocket knife stuck in the wooden beam next to their freshly carved names. Only now, new lines crossed out their names. I rushed down the staircase and frantically searched the surrounding woods. I screamed the boys' names until my voice grew hoarse. My hands shook, and sweat rolled down my forehead. The boys weren't there, and there was no sign of where they had been taken. It was well after midnight by the time I made it home. My wife rushed to the door as I walked in. Clearly, she had been crying. "Where have you been? I've been worried sick." She froze when she saw it was just me. "Where are the boys?" she whispered. "They're gone," I muttered. "What?" "Someone took them." I was beginning to cry. "I couldn't find them." She looked down at my broken hand, and with a whimper, tears began to fall, and she ran upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. In a daze, I called the police. An hour later, the sheriff arrived at the house. The two of us sat down at the dining room table as he took my story. "Did you get a good look at the man who took your sons?" I nodded. "He was a park ranger." He looked up from his notepad. "A ranger?" I sniffled. "Yeah, he was wearing a ranger uniform, not like the newer ones, but an older version." The sheriff lowered his voice and asked, "Were you at the tower?" I was confused. "Yeah, you know about it?" He stroked his beard for a moment before answering. "They have tried destroying that tower for years, burning it, tearing it apart, bulldozing the site. Doesn't matter. Sooner or later, it shows up somewhere else." I stared in disbelief. "Sheriff, what happened to my boys?" Sad eyes stared back at me. "Truth is, I don't really know. We aren't sure who or what that man is, but he's tied to the tower, and he only takes kids." "Where do they go? What does he do with them?" He shook his head. "We don't know, but if they aren't found by September 6th, they'll never be found." I could feel tears forming again. "What?" "September 7th through 14th is when he's most active. It's when he finishes the job. Everyone who goes missing in the park is completely forgotten by September 15th. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but he continued. "We've had hundreds of kids go missing in the park, but when September 7th comes, faces grow blurry in our minds, and by the end of the week, we don't remember their names or who they were. The thing is, we know we can't remember. It's like we know someone is missing, but have no memory of who or when." I wiped tears from my face. Pictures change, birth certificates vanish. Parents know what they have lost, just not who they have lost. We call it Remembrance Week to remember that something is missing that we can't remember ever being taken. I rose from the table. "You need to find my boys." He swallowed. "We'll try, that's all I can promise, but my men will search only till September 6th. After that, it's far too dangerous." They searched night and day for 5 days. All they found was one of the hiking boots Peter had worn. The morning of September 6th, the sheriff came to my wife and me and said, "I'm sorry, we've done all we can." My wife is a wreck. She locked herself in our room and refused to eat. I'm writing this the night of September 6th. I've packed my gear, food, water, a flashlight, sleeping bag, a tent, first aid supplies, maps, and pictures of my boys. I'm heading into the park alone very soon. I have to find my boys. It's my fault they're in there. I'm writing their names down one last time before I go. Aaron, Peter. I don't know why, but I'm afraid I won't remember them when I come back.
Something peculiar is happening in a major city in England, and I'm quite sure that I'm being blocked from making it public. I'm Haley Bennett, a relatively successful freelance journalist, and I moved to this city a couple years back. I cover any local story that takes my interest. When my dad was still alive, he was successful in the industry, so I have firm connections to multiple publications that regularly publish my reports, articles, and interviews. Some are national, some local. In this industry, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And my dad gave me a great entrance into a journalistic freedom that not many get to experience. So I was extremely shocked when I was turned down by 5 of my go-to editors when I pitched them the article I am about to share with you. Because something that is this out of the ordinary happening in the home of Europe's top colleges is newsworthy. It's rare that my pitches are turned down, but when they are, I am always given excellent feedback about why. This time, I have just been told no. There has been no explanation, no advice, no spec to work towards. Something is going on. I'm sure of it. Maybe I'm a bit paranoid, but I have decided to put the article out myself while I continue my investigation. I don't feel comfortable being the only one pushing for this to go public. In my 12 years in this profession, I have learned to trust my instinct. And something feels off here. This seems the safest platform for it, at least while I gather more evidence. I am having to keep the name of the city secret for legal reasons. I hope that those of you who read this will get the same uneasy feeling that I have from everything that's happened so far. Editor to include headline. An unexpected influx of mathematicians and scientists has left the residents of City redacted, baffled, after access to the city was temporarily restricted to allow for a mysterious mass arrival that brought the center to a standstill. Following nearby airports closing for several hours at 9 p.m. on Wednesday, City redacted. Smaller private airports had a flurry of private planes arriving throughout the night. An anonymous source who works for the airport told, publication to be added once article is sold, exclusively that there were private planes arriving at all hours. We usually see one or two every couple of days. We're a small airport, but there were so many arrivals, more than I've ever seen. More than any of my coworkers had ever seen too. We're talking about 15 planes in one night. They were all full of people too. The passengers had to state their occupation after landing, and most seemed to be mathematics and science professors. They were from all over the world. Someone must have known it was happening, because the entire staff were told last month to be prepared to be in on Wednesday night. We weren't told why, and we definitely didn't expect anything like that. We suspected they'd just have us painting the floors or something. The following morning, Thursday 16th of August, up to 50 police cars arrived at the center between 7:30 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. To achieve the high number of police presence, police officers had to have been brought in from other countries, as the local police force only has 38 police officers due to cuts. The police quickly evacuated the center, with cyclists, tourists, and shop owners directed to the outskirts. It was then cordoned off to ensure nobody unauthorized would re-enter Central City redacted. Following that, traffic was stopped all over the city. Then a large number of private plate cars, whose passengers were protected from view by privacy glass, were seen driving towards the areas that the public had been forced to leave. Disgruntled independent bookshop owner Eva Morgan was amongst many locals to witness the arrival. They shot past the direction of the airport. Without a doubt, they were breaking the speed limit. There must have been a couple every minute, at an accurate enough guess. It went on for an hour, so in total, I lost 2 hours of business. Not that the police care about that, of course. As soon as the cars finished entering the center, the cordon was swiftly lifted, and those that had been evacuated were directed back to resume normality. However, tourists were disappointed to find that major attraction, college redacted, library was closed off to the public, and remained so at the time of print. It wasn't only tourists and business owners that were affected. Dr. Raman Elwood, organizer of annual invite-only history event Life History, told, publication to be added once article is sold. I've been organizing this wonderful event for 3 years now. Hard-fought-for funding has allowed us to hire various venues across the city in order to host our convention, which includes lectures, seminars, and workshops. Now, just mere days before, I've been told that the whole thing has to be cancelled until further notice because they need the venues for more urgent business. Life History may have been a relatively new event, but I have 200 attendees and 50 history academics due to arrive. And now I need to tell them that it's not happening. It's completely outrageous that I cannot even give them a reason. Those responsible for this abomination should expect to hear from our solicitors. Other than Life History, no public or private seminars are scheduled in or around the city for the following 2 weeks. So the reason behind the arrival of some of the world's brightest minds remains a mystery. As it stands, city police have not responded to any requests for statements. The unexpected cancellation of what is fast becoming one of the world's most popular history events was preceded by an abrupt cancellation of City redacted, loved and cherished astronomy open evening in March. Held at the city's historical telescope and open to the public, astronomy enthusiasts were gobsmacked earlier this year when Dr. Maria Madden emotionally kicked out attendees halfway through the session, as previously reported by Haley Bennett. Do you have something to share? Contact Haley Bennett at hayley.bennett@.co.uk. I know I'm not exactly the world's best journalist, but I know a story when I see one, and trust me, this is a story. I'm pasting in the article mentioned above, written when the people who run the public astronomy evenings totally lost their minds and kicked everyone out. Thursday 8th, March 2018. City redacted. Astronomers to end public open evenings after shock cancellation. Local astronomy enthusiasts were left out in the cold on Wednesday evening when they were abruptly ejected from the popular astronomy open evening held at city's historical telescope in what eyewitnesses have described as a surreal night. Lecturer Dr. Maria Madden, 31, allegedly ended the institute's public session on the lawn outside city's historical telescope 30 minutes early, insisting that everybody leave the area immediately. The public had been listening to a short lecture by Dr. Madden and were due to go inside and use the telescope, guided by members of the institute. An unnamed elderly colleague, described as having a German accent, is thought to have triggered the early dismissal. It is claimed that he became hysterical in the small building that houses the famous telescope and was heard from the outside by members of the public, crying out, screaming for help, and saying, "It's happening, my God, it's happening." An audience of less than 30 attended Dr. Madden's public lecture, which was much less than the average 90 to 100 attendees. This was perhaps due to the unusual bitter weather experienced in City redacted this week. Mr. Lewis Wright, who was at the public talk with his 12-year-old son, said, "It was all very unexpected. We have attended most open evenings this winter, and they've been professional, but fun. To hear a member of the program having some sort of hysterical meltdown was upsetting. He kept crying out, shouting, 'It's happening.' It was clear he needed help." Following the commotion, Dr. Madden is said to have urged her audience to stay calm before making her way in to attend her distressed colleague. Within minutes, she returned and instructed the entire party to leave. Local amateur astronomer Joanne O'Brien described the scene in more detail. "I heard him crying out for a while before anyone else seemed to notice. I didn't want to interrupt the lecture because it really wasn't very clear what was going on. But then he started screaming out for help. He sounded terrified. I thought he must be having a stroke or a heart attack. Dr. Madden went into him and was back out within 5 minutes. When she came back, she just told us all we needed to leave the grounds. A couple of us asked if she wanted us to stay and help, but she absolutely insisted we left straight away. She was pale as a ghost. In fact, she looked terrified herself. It was a surreal night, to say the least. Even as we were walking away, we could still hear him screaming out. He was shouting, 'My God, it's happening,' over and over again. I tried to contact the institute when I got home because I was concerned, but the phone line was engaged all evening, and nobody responded online." When we contacted for a statement, Dr. Madden sent the following. "On Wednesday, 7th of March, my colleague, who will remain anonymous, experienced health concerns during a public lecture. Some of those attending may have heard his distress, and I am sure they can understand why I made the decision to end the session early. Fortunately, my colleague simply had a minor health scare, and is, thankfully, now well again. Though the Institute's open evenings are scheduled to continue until the end of the month, my team and I made the decision to end them with immediate effect. We apologize for any inconvenience." The early closure came as a shock to locals, many of whom regularly attend the open evenings held by the Astronomy Institute. They were not due to end for the summer until the end of March. When we pushed for reasoning behind the decision to end 3 full weeks early, Dr. Madden declined to comment further. It is currently unknown if they will restart at the beginning of next winter. Do you have something to share? Contact Haley Bennett at hayley.bennett@.co.uk. It might seem like a loose link to the reader, but I've got a growing suspicion that it's relevant. There's more to it that I'm able to write in the article, and I think I might be about to break something big. You see, the anonymous airport source is an ex-boyfriend of mine. When you're a journalist, it's always good to have an ex who works somewhere useful and hangs from your every word. When all the plane full of geniuses were landing, guess who was the one greeting them all? The one and only Dr. Madden. And apparently, she still looked like she'd just seen a ghost. Maybe that's just her face. Or maybe there's something really funny going on here. I've got some leads to follow anyway. Back in March, when Dr. Madden shut down the telescope open evenings from the public, I chased her about it like a hound dog, but she kept totally silent. At the time, I thought they must have been shutting early because of a funding scandal that I could break. But she was too tough to crack, so I let it go. Perhaps naively. I fell hook, line, and sinker for the story about the Yale colleague, so I never tried to interview him. In hindsight, who the hell screams, "My God, it's happening, when they are having a bit of a funny turn?" I've got a few questions for him. I've still got 2 more editors to contact to, who I can try and get to publish my article. One of them is a good friend of mine with a weak publication, but a weak publication is better than no publication. For now, I'm going to get some sleep. I'll update when I know more. Quite a lot has happened since I posted last. First off, I need to warn you not to panic after reading this post. Some of it is shocking. However, I urge you to remember that I'm still investigating this in depth, and it's still extremely important not to jump to conclusions until we have all the information that's out there. I'll jump in now and get you up to speed. I sent my most recent article that I shared with you to my final 2 contacts. I received some really strange messages from them in response. I copied them so I could post them here. My first attempt was a senior editor whom I had trained under when I first started out in journalism. He took a distasteful liking to me, if you know what I mean. So in general, I avoid approaching him unless desperate. We exchanged the following messages. 7:31 a.m. H. Bennett. Hi Joel, hope all is well. Sending along a pitch, let me know what you think. 7:32 a.m. H. Bennett uploaded a document. 7:55 a.m. J. Hughes. Hello Haley. Sorry gorgeous, but I'm going to have to say no to this one. I've heard from above that we're not touching anything to do with this. 7:56 a.m. H. Bennett. Who's above you? 7:59 a.m. J. Hughes. The people who pump in the big money, keeping our site ad-free, unlike that shite you were published on a few weeks back. 8 a.m. H. Bennett. Ah, so the people who buy your readers' votes then. Thanks for nothing. Do you care to at least elaborate why everyone is refusing this article? J. Hughes has left the conversation. 8 a.m. J. Hughes. Haley, it is important that you drop whatever it is you think you're chasing, immediately. It's a non-story, and you're severely damaging the reputation Father passed down to you. If you ever want to publish anything again, then you will let this go. That might not seem like that weird of a message to you. It didn't really to me at first either. However, shortly after speaking to Joel, I messaged my final contact, Michael Hansen. Hansen is a good friend of mine from my uni days. He's an editor of an independent online publication that has a low but loyal following. Our message exchange was extremely weird. 8:45 a.m. H. Bennett. Hiya, handsome. I'm sending you an article. Let me know. H. Bennett uploaded a document. 9:30 a.m. M. Hansen. Hi, Bennett. 9:30 a.m. H. Bennett. You took your time. 9:34 a.m. M. Hansen. Yeah, I know. Listen, who have you pissed off this time? 9:35 a.m. H. Bennett. Who haven't I pissed off? Why do you ask? What's going on? 9:36 a.m. M. Hansen. I was told not to accept any articles from you for the next 3 months. 9:37 a.m. H. Bennett. That doesn't exactly surprise me. Something weird is going on. 3 months seems a bit harsh though. Anyway, you're independent for fuck's sake. Who can tell you not to publish me? 9:38 a.m. M. Henson. Outside the publication. Legal. I don't even know if I can talk about it. So... 9:40 a.m. H. Bennett. Legal? Okay, this is all getting a bit out of hand. I need to talk to you properly about it all. I think I'm onto something. I'm not entirely sure what yet. Maybe we should work together. Can we meet? M. Henson has left the conversation. 9:40 a.m. M. Henson. No, Haley, you need to drop whatever you're going after. It isn't going anywhere, and it's making people angry. It looks like you won't be being published anywhere ever again if you carry this on. Your career will be over. Drop it. Something felt off when I was messaging my first contact. But after reading Henson's messages, I knew that something was really messed up. Both of my connection had gone offline before immediately sending a suspiciously similar long message warning me of my story. No users typing notifications either. They just appeared instantaneously. It was like they had been copied and pasted in as soon as they left the conversation. And another thing, I've known Henson since I was 18 years old. In 12 years, he has never, ever called me Haley. I honestly can't remember a single time in all the years I've known him that he's called me anything but Bennett. He is Handsome Henson. I am Bennett. The more I think about it, the more I am sure that someone hacked into those messages as soon as the conversation went into an area they, whoever they might be, didn't want me to drift into. Now, on to the really important stuff. You'll have to forgive me for not giving you this information straight away. It seems huge, and perhaps more relevant to the focus of the entire investigation. The thing is, I have very little evidence that is reputable, so I'm remaining open-minded while I continue my investigation, and I hope you do the same. Now, let's get down to it. I managed to track down the German colleague of Dr. Madden with ease. I basically had to look up the people in the astrophysics department who are affiliated with the Astronomy Institute. There weren't many names to go through really, and one in particular stood out. Professor Bernd Gartner. A quick search online told me that he is an 86-year-old fellow at the most famous college in the city, right on my doorstep. Likely to be of German origin, works with the Astronomy Institute's opening evenings. It seemed the right lead to follow. Unfortunately, you can't just waltz into the ground of this particular famous college and start knocking on the doors of the fellows. So, I had to get a bit sneaky. I waited until night and then managed to slip quietly into the locked back gate after a resident had entered the code. It was surprisingly easy, though I did have to wait for quite a while until someone was entering, as most students are home for the summer. Anyway, I had reached the courtyard within minutes, and because it was late evening, the place was pretty much deserted. I crept around the edge of the perfect lawns, resisting my childlike temptation to step on the grass. Thankfully, it didn't take too long to find what I was looking for. One of the many stone archways that hide the steep wooden steps that led to the residencies of only the most respected academics of the college finally jumped out as relevant, because this particular one had 4 names on gold plaques, and one jumped out. Doctor, Professor, Professor, and lastly, Professor Bernd Gartner. Bingo! Of course, he had to be right at the top, meaning I'd have to tiptoe past 3 other doors. I crept around the spiraling staircase. The silence seemed to cover the entire college, meaning that every creak my steps made echoed all around me. I was sure that one of the doors would burst open and an angry old professor would corner me. But somehow, I got to Professor Bernd Gartner's residence without being stopped. I knocked on the door as quietly as I could. Too quietly perhaps, because after a minute, there still had been no answer. I knocked louder, each thump making my heart hammer in my chest. I waited for 2 minutes, and when there was still no response, I found myself horrendously disappointed. I turned and started back down the staircase, bitterly accepting that I was back to square one. When I heard the door open behind me. "What do you want?" An old, papery voice whispered, the German accent evident. I turned and saw a small, slim man with wide eyes under round spectacles, peering at me. "Professor Bernd Gardner?" I replied. I managed to keep my tone low, but my excitement made a whisper impossible. I didn't wait for him to answer. I was too eager to jump right in. "I'm Haley Bennett. I'm a local writer." "I've been told not to speak with you," he interrupted. I frowned and got ready to fight my corner. However, as I opened my mouth to protest, he opened his door fully and disappeared inside. I followed, my adrenaline buzzing. Closing the door behind me, within seconds I found myself sitting opposite an academically famous astrophysicist as he smoked a pipe and drank port. And so began a very confusing, and in parts, creepy chat with Professor Gardner, who was indeed the man who caused the commotion at the telescope tower in March. So, reader, hold on tight, because here is my journalistic interpretation of our conversation. There are some pretty huge claims in here, but don't let that bypass the fact that there is a glaring lack of detailed information. Remember, keep a critically open mind. Headline to be included by editor. A theoretical astrophysicist with more than 70 years experience has claimed that a cosmic event that could potentially destroy a chunk of the solar system is imminent. Professor Bernd Gardner, 86, a college redacted fellow, has spent a total of 58 years studying a theory that suggests that a specific cosmic event could cause extreme damage to the part of the solar system that houses Earth. Gardner and his research partner, the late Professor Karol Lebedev, developed the theory in the mid-1950s. After a great number of years investigating, in March 2018, Gardner claims to have witnessed an astronomical anomaly during an open evening held by City Redacted Astronomy Institute. According to Gardner, his finding suggests that their theory was not only accurate, but fast approaching. Gardner spoke to reporter Haley Bennett in an exclusive interview for Editor to include headline. He explained that in 1955, "We proposed that a particular cosmic event could, in very unique circumstances, really damage the chunk of our solar system that houses Earth. The circumstances were so unique and unlikely that we did not receive fundings to take our workings further, but in our spare time, we pursued it over the years. In the late 1960s, a military satellite picked up on an event that astronomers struggled to explain for many years. However, my research partner and I strongly believe that the event was related to our original theory. In the scenario that the event was indeed related to our theory, then that meant our predictions were a lot more likely than we first believed. We pushed for a team of scientists, but were refused. However, we were given generous positions in our field and able to dedicate our full working time to it." When Gardner's research partner died in 2002, Gardner made the huge decision to cease work on their theory due to the enormity of their scientific investigation becoming too overwhelming in his partner's absence. At that point in their research, the cosmic event they had theorized still seemed unlikely to happen. In Gardner's opinion at the time, it did not justify ongoing scrutiny, a decision he later came to regret. Deciding to work in other areas of astrophysics, Gardner nestled into the background of City Redacted. One of his responsibilities was setting up the city's historical telescope for Astronomy Institute open evenings. In March 2018, Gardner was setting up the telescope ready for public use when he made a shocking discovery. "I observed a phenomenon that meant that mine and my partner's theory was much more accurate than we had ever anticipated. Frighteningly so." When asked to elaborate on what this could mean for humanity, Gardner told publication to be added when article is sold. "Damage to the planet Earth that will be so severe that humanity will cease to exist appears imminent. It seems likely that we're all going to burn." Although much information is needed in order to provide an assessment of whether Gardner's claims are credible, they have the potential to be extremely concerning. Gardner's claims have come to light following an unexpected influx of mathematicians and scientists in City Redacted, as previously reported by Haley Bennett. When contacted for more information, City Redacted, Center of Experimental Astrophysics, declined to comment. Do you have something to share? Contact Haley Bennett at haleybennett@.co.uk. I don't pretend that I'm a scientific journalist, so my report on what the professor told me is extremely basic. Though, to be honest, everything he told me was clearly a watered-down version of what he knows, or believes he knows, at least. Before you lose your minds and start planning for the end of the world, I'm going to suggest you take a breather. The article you have just read is absolutely full of holes, and that is certainly not my choice. I just didn't get a lot of solid information out of Professor Gardner. I'm not totally sure he's trustworthy, and on a personal level, he was a bit weird. Don't get me wrong, he seems like a really nice man. He's exceptionally intelligent and clearly knows his stuff. But there was something off with the whole meet. For example, right after he said we were all going to burn, he drifted off into a sort of catatonic state and just shut down from me. I literally could not get him to talk to me again after his whole big reveal. I thought he might be ill. He carried on smoking a pipe and drinking port. I guess he just wanted to freeze me out. Anyway, it was odd. I left him a card with my details on, but I doubt I'll hear from him. I'm not saying that what he told me was necessarily incorrect or untrue, but I am saying that it's important to be cautious and not to jump to conclusions. There is more investigating to do before we can create any of our own theories. Unfortunately, I can't even look into the papers he published on his theory for verification. Not only because they're all behind a paywall, but also, I simply wouldn't be able to understand his work. Currently, with such a lack of evidence, I'm not even going to bother pitching this article to anyone, because I know where it will get me. Laughed out of my career. I'm keeping it close though, while I continue investigating. Next, I plan on heading to some of the venues that the Life History event had booked but lost. I suspect I might see some of the mathematicians and scientists that were flown in. Maybe I can get some of them to talk. Oh, and before I sign off, one more thing happened that was weird. In the morning, hours before my weird message exchanges with my journalist connections, I took an early morning walk. On my way past one of our incredibly famous landmarks, I saw that someone had graffitied on it. Now, we have crimes and problems in the city, just like every other place. Not that long ago, someone threw actual human feces at a police officer. And a couple years back, one of the rich students burned a 20-pound note in front of a homeless person. The point I'm trying to get across is that we do get some nasty people here, but to see graffiti on a building that is so historically important to the city is unheard of. My instinct is telling me it has something to do with all the crazy stuff happening here. It was red writing that someone had painted specifically so it would appear that blood was dripping from the letters. I hadn't taken my phone out with me, which is a real shame because it was actually quite beautiful. Luckily, I had a pen and a small notepad in my pocket, so I was able to jot it down. It read, "When the pound drops, it has begun." I walked back past the site of the vandalism many hours later, on my way back from talking to Professor Gardner. It had been painted over. There was no sign that anything had ever been there. I'll update you on everything as soon as I know more. I spent the majority of the day hanging around various venues around the city. Most of the places that Life History had booked were large seminar-style rooms that I couldn't gain access to because they were inside university buildings. I stood at the main entrance of various buildings at the beginning and end of the booking times, hoping to see a large group arriving or leaving. I knew it was a long shot though, because these buildings have tons of exits. Still, I tried with 3 different venues on the off chance it would pay off. I didn't witness anything out of the ordinary. All I saw were everyday types making their way in and out. It was relatively quiet due to the students being off for the summer, so I'm fairly certain I didn't miss any large groups of academics. That didn't mean they hadn't been inside. It just meant I didn't have decent enough access. I had expected that though. The one venue I had real hopes for was the theater. Life History had booked it for 3 hours in the afternoon, and it had a capacity of over 1,800. There were only 2 exits and entrances, and they were both easily accessible to the public. An hour before the event was booked, I arrived at the multi-story car park opposite the theater with a decision to make. Should I simply try and question attendees, or should I try and gain entrance to the event? If those attending were who I expected them to be, the mathematicians and scientists that had entered the city just days before, then it would be quite obvious. Large groups of academics usually have a pretty specific style. Smart, casual clothes, quiet and thoughtful actions, middle-class behaviors. It would be very different from the crowds who attended the typical shows held at the theater, such as comedians, bands and plays. There is a distinctive difference between the actions of people attending a work conference and those attending a recreational activity. I knew all the door staff who worked for the theater, as I attended regularly, and I always made a habit of making connections with as many local faces as possible. I was fairly confident I could talk my way into the event. Unfortunately, I was blocked almost as soon as I made the decision to go for it. Just 10 minutes after I arrived at my stakeout position, multiple cars pulled up outside the theater people, and lots of people in black suits surrounded the theater, promptly blocking off access. These were not the usual doormen. They were all more heavily built, and they seemed much more aware of their surroundings. It was very professional and serious security. I stayed where I was. I watched as a slow trickle of smartly dressed middle-aged men and women finally started coming down the street. They all paused in front of the guest door staff, who promptly searched them. I found that very odd, as they don't usually search guests. I watched as their tickets were taken from them by the security staff and scanned by a handheld machine. Then the guests were ushered quickly inside. Before long, the trickle had turned into a swarm. I was sure that these were the mathematicians and scientists who had entered the city, and probably many who already worked and resided here. I would estimate that around 500 people were attending the conference, which, particularly on short notice, is big. When it was nearing the time the event was supposed to begin, I decided to try my luck with asking attendees for interviews. Something about the way they approached the theater told me I would hit a brick wall. They didn't seem to be distracted by any of the historical buildings that surrounded it. None of them seemed to be popping into the famous pub just beside the venue for a swift lunchtime pint. This was definitely not a casual afternoon out. They were like a line of ants, walking methodically to their destination. I had to at least try and talk to them though, so I made my way down the concrete steps to the exit of the car park. When I opened the door that led onto the street, I jumped out of my skin when I physically bumped into one of the security staff, who may as well have been a brick wall. He just stood in the doorway facing me, as though he had been waiting for me to come out. His face held no readable emotion. When I tried to get past, he stood firm, and though I wasn't particularly intimidated by it, I was extremely irritated. He eventually moved aside. However, by that time, there were only a few stragglers left running into the theater. It wasn't a suitable situation to ask any questions. I muttered a passive-aggressive, "Thanks a lot," and made my way onto the street, disappointed and grumpy. I went into the pub next to the theater and waited for 3.5 hours. I wandered out onto the street a few times, and I was surprised to find I could hear shouting coming from inside the theater. Sometimes I walked past at night and hear applause or laughter when a show was on. But this was a bunch of angry people all shouting about different things at once. I couldn't distinguish anything they said, but it was interesting all the same. When they eventually left, they all spilled out and left in various directions, The security staff didn't try and keep me from them this time. So I waited on the street as the attendees passed around me. They barely noticed my presence. There wasn't any excited chatter nor any shouting like I heard from the inside. Instead, they all walked in an eerie silence with desolate looks set on their faces. I tried to call out quick-fire questions to a few of them, but they all ignored me. Within 10 minutes, most people were gone, and that's when Dr. Madden emerged from inside. She stood at the top of the steps to the theater and put her face into her hands. She was obviously stressed out about something. On instinct, I ran up to the steps to talk to her, but before I could get near her, one of the door staff threw out an arm and my chest collided with it. I was winded by his action and doubled over to try and catch my breath. He didn't offer to help me. I don't think he even looked at me. A moment later, I felt gentle hands touching my shoulders. It was Dr. Madden, and she guided me up the steps into the theater. Another security person approached me, perhaps to search me. He stopped that when she snapped at him authoritatively. "She can come in. Don't touch her." She led me into a side room and got me a drink of water. After a quick swig, I pulled off my backpack, placing it on the table between us. "I'm going to record this," I informed her, pressing the record button immediately, still panting a little. "Oh, and thank you for your help," I remembered to add. To my surprise, rather than shut down and ask me to leave, Dr. Madden laughed resignedly, waving her hand nonchalantly at the dictaphone and gesturing for us both to sit down. Here's a transcribe of our conversation. "I haven't seen you for quite a while, Miss Bennett. I was starting to think you had given up. I'm sorry for the way you were manhandled out there. They seem to have no sense of decorum. Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you again for your help." "You're welcome. Now, regarding what we discuss here in this room, I want to make it clear that nothing that you record will be published. You can try all you want, but no one with any reputation will go anywhere near any of this. And I can't promise to answer all your questions. I'm open to a short conversation though. So, what is it that you want to know, Miss Bennett?" "Firstly, what was the conference held here today about?" "A number of things. Optical afterglows and relativistic blast waves, for example." "Why were the experts that attended the seminar shouting?" "There was a heated debate, let's call it, on the moral obligation of scientists." "Why were so many mathematicians and scientists flown into City redacted.
earlier this week?" "They're working on a large project that requires many different experts from various fields of science." "Is this project related to Professor Bern Gardner's discovery at the telescope in March?" "Have you spoken to Professor Gardner, Miss Bennett?" "Are you able to answer the question, Dr. Madden?" "I'm going to have to insist you turn off the recording device if you would like me to discuss Bern."
I did as she asked, because I knew from experience that Dr. Madden was prone to total silence when talking to local press, and I didn't want to push my luck. I was amazed that I even got her to talk in the first place. I had to show her that I was willing to cooperate with her, so I didn't scupper any future chance of correspondence. She basically explained to me that Professor Gardner has Alzheimer's, and that he has been showing signs of getting increasingly confused. She told me that he had worked on a theory an incredibly long time that, yes, was related to the project she had spoken of. In his old age, she told me he was struggling to distinguish some of the wilder and/or earlier aspects of his theory from parts that are currently relevant. I really did not want to ask if humanity was at risk. I mean, after what she had explained, I really felt that something so far-fetched must be preposterous. Professor Gardner being ill made total sense, especially when I thought about how odd he had acted when I had met him. I was worried that if I gave Dr. Madden the impression that I was a potential conspiracy theorist, it might push her into shutting down on me. However, I took a deep breath and asked anyway, Because even if it wasn't the end of the world as we know it, there was definitely something major happening, and I had to get to the bottom of it somehow. One thing I will certainly give Dr. Madden great credit for. She has an excellent poker face. She neither burst out laughing at my question, nor did she turn grave and foreboding. She looked at me for what felt like forever, with a total unreadable expression. Then, she smiled sadly and tilted her head to the side, taking a deep breath. Though I'm paraphrasing, the following is quite accurate. She said, "Something is in motion in this city, Miss Bennett, that will lead to a colossal change to the future of mankind. Whether it is a change that is for better or for worse, well, quite simply, we do not yet know. In order to discover this, the magnificent collection of minds that have gathered here must be allowed to decide on a plan of research and action. In order to do this, we need time. We simply cannot allow the press to jump to false conclusions, because we are working on a very complex subject, and even a minor misunderstanding could cause absolute mayhem. You've been locked out from reporting on this for a very good reason. We need to be able to work in order to give humanity the best chance. So please, Miss Bennett, let us do our jobs." Yes, she had an excellent poker face. And I'll tell you something. She made a huge mistake when she stopped using it. Maybe I would have sympathized with her if she had remained expressionless, if she allowed me to draw my own conclusions instead of attempting to lead me to them. When she plastered that sad smile on her face, when she forced a stance and a sigh, it changed the entire way I perceived her break plea for me to back off. Without that smile, I might have listened. Instead, she tried to manipulate me. She must have thought I was a fool if she thought I was going to fall for that. Well, I could play that game too, and I was better than her at it. I smiled back and nodded my head understandingly, not verbally agreeing with her plea, but hopefully leaving her with the impression that I had fallen for her bad acting. I left the room not long after, declining Dr. Madden's offer to walk me out, and instead leaving her alone behind me. Another bad move on her behalf, because instead of going to the exit, I slipped into the theater. Just an hour before, it had been full of academics who had apparently been attempting to give humanity the best chance. I knew I only had moments in here. If Madden came out and saw me, I would, without a doubt, sever any ties we now had, and she would know, without a doubt, that I hadn't fallen for her charade. My eyes scanned the room. There was nothing there that particularly stood out from afar, so I jogged up the aisles and glanced down each row of seats. I heard footsteps approaching the main entrance into the auditorium, so I crouched down behind the closest row to me, hidden from sight. The sound of heels clipping the wooden floor echoed around me as my heart hammered in my chest. I didn't breathe until I heard the footsteps retreating back the way they came from. I stood up quickly, ready to make a speedy exit. However, now that I was facing the stage, I could see there was a large blackboard covered in smeared chalk. Whoever had rubbed the contents away had missed the bottom right-hand corner though, and I could see that it said 320 billion pounds. I didn't stick around to think about it, instead jogging quietly up to the far end of the auditorium, which I knew led to the second quieter exit. To my relief, I managed to get out of there without bumping into anyone, so I think the security people must have already left. Thinking about everything that Dr. Madden told me, I have to wonder how much of what she said was true. If I'm honest, as I was interviewing her, I got close to dropping the entire story. Journalists like me reporting on areas of science can have devastating consequences. That might seem dramatic, but if you report on something scientific incorrectly, then it can lead to some problems such as mass information and hysteria. I was strongly considering just leaving all of the experts to get on with it, then watching them bring in actual science reporters and just playing witness to the aftermath. But she tried to manipulate me. Because of that, I know that there is something here for me to chase. What is she trying to hide? And what about the value written on the chalkboard? 320 billion pounds. That's an absolutely absurd amount of money. The richest man in the world only has 120 billion pounds. Why was that figure written there? Well, it's safe to assume that I will not be dropping this story. While I'm still getting leads thrown into my lap, I'm going to keep chasing them. And talking about having leads thrown into my lap, just a minute ago, I watched a grumpy old college porter push an envelope through my door. Inside was a handwritten note from Professor Gardner inviting me to meet with him this evening. I'll update you when I have more. Professor Gardner is dead. I'm in total shock. And he's not the only one. He was one of the 4 deaths in the city yesterday. I don't know what's going on here. It's so hard to fit the pieces of this puzzle together. I just want to go to bed and put this all behind me. But I need to write it all down first, so I can try to make sense of it when I'm a little more with it. I went to Professor Gardner yesterday evening, not long after receiving his note. As I was there by invite this time, I didn't have to sneak in. I was able to go into the college via the main entrance. The porter was expecting me, and he led me up to the professor's residence. I didn't bother saying that I already knew the way, partly because I wasn't keen on revealing I already been there, but also because it's good to make connections with as many people as possible. Porters know everything going around the colleges. The porter was an older man whose knees creaked as he walked, though compared to the professor, I suppose he felt like a spring chicken. He knocked on Gardner's door quietly, and when there was no response, he called out, "Haley Bennett is here, as expected, Professor." When there was still no response, the porter knocked louder. But the professor would not be opening his door ever again. I'm sure that the porter broke protocol, because he got out his own set of keys and unlocked Gardner's door while I still stood behind him. I think I knew then that something serious was wrong. The concern etched on his face, the jangle of the keys and clunk of the lock echoing around the staircase. There was a feeling of foreboding, and when the porter pushed open the door, sure enough, Professor Gardner was slumped over his desk. The porter cried out, "Burned!" and rushed over, shaking him gently. He was limp. After a quick check for a pulse, I was surprised to see the porter's eyes fill with tears. He looked at me almost apologetically as I fumbled around with my phone, preparing to ring the emergency services. "I've worked for Bert for a very long time," he murmured. "No, he's gone." While we waited for an ambulance, I looked around the professor's living area. The porter told me he had delivered his nightly half bottle of port to his door just an hour before. Everything in the room seemed much as it had on my previous visit, from what I could tell. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe I was just trying to keep busy so I didn't have to stare at the cadaver of an old man. Or maybe I wanted to avoid awkward small talk with the porter. I know that at 86 years old, when suffering from Alzheimer's, it isn't unlikely that you will pass away. Still, I couldn't help but feel that something was off here. Perhaps it was a total coincidence that he died just before I was due to meet him. Or maybe there was more to it. Was anything different this evening? I asked the porter. He looked at me confused. Any unexpected stresses? I added, so as not to imply anything was off. The porter shook his head. All was as usual. His port arrived a little earlier than expected. I think that was more of a treat than a stress though. I glanced at the bottle on the table. There was a fancy bowl discarded to the side of it. And sure enough, there was a half-empty glass next to the professor's body. The bottle had a quarter left. I did something I'm only slightly ashamed of. I pretended to become overwhelmed by the situation, letting fake tears spill down my cheeks. The porter looked terrified. I spluttered for him to give me some tissues, and when he had disappeared into another room, I quickly slipped the bottle of port into my bag. It was a big risk. If the porter noticed, then I would really struggle to explain my actions. At the same time, it was all I could think to do. This would be closed immediately. The professor's agent health completely pointed to natural causes. I knew it wouldn't be further investigated. Perhaps rightly so, but I had to do something. Once the ambulance arrived, I made my exit and started to walk home. If the porter had noticed, he hadn't said anything. I was still shocked by the outcome of the evening and needed something to take the edge off. So I went to a bar for a couple of drinks. As I sat in a corner alone, I went online on my phone and ordered a drink testing kit for drugs, paying extra so that it would arrive tomorrow. I thought it was unlikely that I would find anything in Gardnersport, particularly something an amateur kid could detect, but I needed to rule it out. After placing the order, I put my phone away and paid some attention to my surroundings. The mood was somewhere in the bar. Nobody played the piano. There wasn't a bustle of chatter. Even the bar staff seemed distant. I drank my pint, then went up for another. As the bartender poured it, I asked her why it was so quiet. She shook her head and looked around before dropping her voice, barely above a whisper. There's been a suicide. A nasty one. She had a glint in her eyes that told me she was excited to share the morbid gossip. Someone jumped from the clock tower. They're saying he was a scientist. She didn't know anything else. I drank my second pint quickly, then decided to go and check out the clock tower myself. It wasn't surprising to hear of a suicide in the city, in all honesty. With so many people here under so much pressure, there is a surprisingly high suicide rate among students and academics alike. However, to jump from a historical landmark wasn't typical. When I got there, the police were spraying down the pavement underneath the clock tower. There were a couple of people hanging around, and I stood behind them so the police attending wouldn't spot me. Most of the local force recognized me, and I knew they'd tell me to leave straight away. I shuddered as I watched the red water trickling down the gutters into the drain, chunks of gray carried in its flow. I was pleased that the body had already been removed, because I was still shook up over Professor Gardner, though the remains that were floating away left little to the imagination. I looked up at the clock tower, so intimidatingly tall, like all the buildings around here. There was no doubt what your fate would be if you fell from such a height. How could somebody just step out, knowing that in a couple seconds they would be splattered all over the ground so far beneath them? I considered trying to get to the top of the clock tower, but I'm not entirely reckless. Plus, police had taped it off, and it's such a small area that there wouldn't be any sneaking past them. Moments later, a stream of sirens screamed their way past us. 3 police cars, an ambulance, and an emergency responder car soared past in the direction of the other side of the city. A police officer close by to me said something into her radio, and almost straight away, a muffled voice spoke back to her. I didn't understand what they had said. It was mainly in a numbered code that I didn't know. But I watched the police officer look at her colleague, and he promptly turned off the sprayer. Surprising concern swept over her paling face. Another 2 suicides? She said, a question rather than a statement. She had forgotten there were spectators around, and as the onlookers near me gasped, she realized her mistake. Her paling face even more so. I stepped through the small crowd, pulling out my press card. Officer, can you explain what has happened here tonight? I said, my even and flat tone hiding the fear I felt inside. Well, that was the end of that. I was greeted by a wall of no comment and ordered to leave or be arrested. I shrugged as I walked away. I'm just doing my job, I called over my shoulder, then walked in the direction the emergency services had sped. The area was cordoned off a lot further than the clock tower had been, presumably because the bodies had not yet been removed. I couldn't see a thing, but I knew the building above and around me was a biomedic center, strictly only accessible by those who worked there. There was a woman crying nearby, being confronted by a paramedic. She had a blanket around her shoulders and was sipping a steaming drink. "I was just walking along," she said, with a hint of hysteria in her voice. "Then they both landed right in front of me." She erupted in tears. I walked around the edge of the cordon, trying to see if I could find anything out. It was dark and a little out of the center, so there weren't many onlookers. I saw two people not too far away that, judging by their body language, were having a heated argument. I wasn't getting much from the rest of my surroundings, so I decided to turn on my dictaphone and sneak up close enough to record them, but where I was mainly hidden from their side. It was a lucky, but a good decision. I peered around and saw that the couple having the argument were two men. One that looked in his early 20s and a middle-aged, balding man. They were both dressed in expensive-looking black tie suits. I soon discovered they are father and son. Here's what I caught from their agitated conversation, with M1 being the younger one and M2 being the older one. M1: "Is this what it's going to be like? Those involved jumping off buildings left, right and center." M2: "Keep your voice down. You're being very unrestrained. These ones were weak, but there are many more who are prepared to do what it takes." M1: "But why does it have to take so many deaths? How can this possibly be the right way?" M2: "It's the only way, and you know it." M1: "You seem to think that every little thing LaRue says is the only way, Father. Do you not have a spine of your own?" I heard the crack of slap across skin, and the voices abruptly stopped. I popped my head around the corner and saw the younger man storming quickly in my direction, the redness of one cheek telling me he had just been struck by his dad. Thankfully, he was too distressed to notice how close I was stood, and I slipped back into the shadows before I drew any more attention to myself. He had a mass of eccentric black hair and a frenzied look in his eye. I wanted to follow him, but the older man ran after him just a moment later, grabbing him forcefully by the arm and dragging him towards the road where there was a car waiting. Black paint job, blacked out windows, and private plates. They sped off. There was little else to see at the scene of the suicides. The cordons still hadn't been lifted, and the police refused to comment, telling me to have some respect and wait for the families to make statements. They kept telling me to leave, but the area they had taped off was large enough for me to just go over to the other end, where I wouldn't be noticed for a while. They didn't take my being there too seriously really, so I stuck around for 2 more hours. From what little I had been able to pick up on, it was 2 scientists who had jumped to their deaths. So it seems that 3 scientists jumped from tall buildings in the same night. And Professor Gardner was dead too. As if I needed any more drama that night, I found another piece of artistic vandalism on the wall of a building on my way home. It was the early hours of the morning by this time, a couple hours earlier than I'd seen the last piece when I had been taking an early morning walk. That one had read, "When the pound drops, it has begun." The new one was painted on a different building from the last, and though both buildings were equally historical, they held no link. The center of the city isn't a massive place, so it wasn't surprising that I spotted it. I just needed to be out and about and get a glimpse. I wondered if I had missed one the night before. The new one had the same dripping blood design, and it chillingly made me think of the suicide victim's blood washing away down the drains into the city sewers. This one read, "The children of the rich will be taken first." Does that make sense to you? Neither of the messages make any sense to me. I'll openly admit it. I thought about it all the way home, and though I could not decipher the mysterious messages, they did tell me one very important thing. Someone in the city wants to speak out. I need to find out who. I came close to hitting a dead end when we found Gardner's body. However, the conversation between the father and son that I had overheard outside the biochemistry laboratories has given me a new lead. The name LaRue rang a bell, and when I got home, I looked it up. It took a little while for me to find out what I was looking for, but after some digging, I remembered where I had heard the name. Christopher LaRue. I briefly investigated him when I thought there was a funding scandal going on after Dr. Madden shut down the open evenings. Shortly after his closure, he donated a large undisclosed sum of money. He's a billionaire CEO of a large private space company. I can't name the name of it here, because there's no way I'm getting involved with his lawyers. Let's call them BOS, and I'll hope that isn't too much to give the company away. He's quite a private person, so it's hard to find information online unless you know where to look. I have just spent a long time looking through the profiles of people he works with directly. I eventually found that one of his colleagues posted on their social media that she is in this city, working on some real exciting stuff. That may well indicate that LaRue is here too. Of course, I can't be sure that the CEO of BOS is the same LaRue that the arguing father and son were talking about. I could be clutching at straws. I do feel like it seems likely though, because the links are quite strong. As it stands, I'm not really sure what to do with this information. So for now, I'm going to sleep on it. And we'll see what tomorrow brings. I'll post again when I know more. Yesterday evening, I took a late nap, then headed out onto the streets of the city. I planned out a route that would ensure I would pass all major buildings in the center in a reasonable amount of time. I did this for the majority of the night, repeating a loop around the city. My aim was to catch the mysterious graffiti artist in the act. I have gone over and over the messages, and it makes such little sense to me. I really think I just need to talk to him. Or her. I appreciate the ideas that those of you following my investigation have offered about what they might mean, because I've been stumped. It was a long night, that's for sure. The level of artwork in the previous messages told me that they hadn't been some quick scrawl on the wall job. A lot of talent and passion had been poured into the blood that dripped from every letter. It had clearly taken a bit of time, so I'm quite sure that if the artist had been preparing a new message as I walked around the city, then I would have seen them at some point. However, I didn't catch so much as a glimpse of the mystery artist. I have to admit that I was very disheartened and disappointed, because the story was going cold, and an interview or even a new message to try and understand was just what I needed. Things don't always work out the way we want them to though. As dawn broke, I headed home and sent off an email to an Australian science journalist that I have loose connections to. I probably would have given it a miss, because it's a bit embarrassing reaching out like that. But during my long evening, as I racked my brain for connections, I remembered that she had written quite an extensive piece on Christopher LaRue, the CEO of the private space company BOS, some time ago. In my email, I gave her a rather brief explanation of everything that has happened. I kept in mind that someone had potentially hacked my messages when I had previously tried to reach out to other journalists, so I tried to keep things vague. At this point, I'm not sure who is watching me. I got some sleep, but in the early hours of the afternoon, I woke to something being pushed through my letterbox. I stumbled out of bed and ripped open a small parcel. It was the drug test strips that I had ordered yesterday. Grabbing a glass from my cupboard, I filled it with a port from the bottle I had taken from Professor Gardner's residence. It was a long shot. I know it. You know it. So you can imagine my total surprise when the test indicated that there had indeed been drugs inside the port. It tested positive for ketamine. I don't know much about the drug myself, but a quick bit of research told me that it is an odorless and colorless tranquilizer, and that it can be deadly when mixed with alcohol. I thought about going to the police. Of course I did. I weighed up the pros and cons of the possible outcomes from sharing this information with the local enforcement. Through me presenting this evidence, an autopsy would surely be ordered on Professor Gardner's body that would eventually lead to his real cause of death. However, what evidence did I actually have? I had taken a bottle from the professor's residence. My fingerprints were all over it. They might draw the conclusion that I had put the drug into the bottle and taken it to cover my tracks. Irregardless of whatever stance the police may have taken, I believed that there was a big possibility that Dr. Madden would hear if I informed them about what I knew. Then, she would be aware that I was investigating Professor Gardner's death. If she knew I had gone to meet him, and if she found out I had taken something from his room, well, she would know for certain that I hadn't fell for a play act in the theater. As things were clearly getting dangerous, and she seemed to be some sort of lead in whatever this was, I decided to keep the poison port to myself. I had already exposed myself more than I wanted to by emailing my Australian connection, so there already was a chance that Dr. Madden might know I was still looking into everything. So I wasn't about to potentially let myself get locked in a prison cell. I know a couple of the readers following my investigation have warned me that I might be in danger. I too feel that I'm only safe while I'm not a threat. And I truly believe that if I presented this evidence, then I would suddenly become a hazard in whatever weird truth was going on behind the closed doors of Dr. Madden and her associates. I did decide to contact the police about something else though. The deaths of 4 scientists in the city should have been very big news, and I hadn't seen it reported anywhere. I rang the liaison officer that I work with when I report anything crime related, and she told me that nothing was being reported until further notice, but that an official statement would be released in due time. All she would give me was that it was presumed to be 3 suicides and 1 death of natural causes. Now, the silence here from the police isn't entirely unusual. There are strict protocols you have to follow when it comes to reporting a death. In my professional opinion, the silence surrounding this suggests to me that these deaths are being treated as criminal cases, meaning any news pieces could potentially damage future trials. Or that news reports are being blocked by someone above, for unknown reasons. I could have whisked up a quick article, keeping the names of those who died anonymous. I didn't want to though. I feel uncomfortable reporting that the deaths are presumed to be 3 suicides and 1 of natural causes. I have evidence that Professor Gardner's death might actually be a murder, so I'm not going to put my name on an article that suggests otherwise. However, I also feel uncomfortable about putting a spin on the report of deaths. You know, like suggesting to my readers that there might be more to this than meets the eye. The problem with that is that some family members might read it, and I do not want to be responsible for causing them more pain than they already are going through. That's not my style. I decided to get out of the house for a bit. I walked into the center and drifted in and out of a few shops. I picked up a copy of a best-selling book from a few years back, a poetic and unique novella about grief. Taking it to the counter, I scrawled a quick note on a card that offered my condolences in my name and number. I asked the cashier to gift wrap it. Then I made my way to the college where Professor Gardner had resided. While I had been walking the streets the night before, I had thought a lot about the porter with whom I had shared the discovery of the professor's body. The tears that had filled his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands, the wobble in his voice. He had been very upset about the professor's passing, and I felt ashamed of myself for not even asking his name. You see a lot of insignificant people in the city. There are so many who function as servants to the rich, and they spend their life almost without their own persona. And I was ashamed at myself for not even considering what he was going through, for not even thinking to ask his name. I left the wrap gift with a different porter, who assured me he would get the gift to Thomas as soon as he was able to. I felt a little better. We make mistakes in life, and that's fine, but we must always do our best to rectify them if we can. At home, I checked my email. I was surprised to see my connection in Australia had emailed me back so quickly, since I hadn't spoken to her in a long time. I've copied in her email for you to read. Remember, I didn't give her all the details, just the bare minimum. Oh, and she curses quite a bit. Sorry. Hi Haley, it's been a while. What a messed up situation you're in. Sorry to hear that your work's being blocked. Hope I can help you get that sorted. We all need to earn a living. So, I looked into the announcements from around the time that you think this Professor Gardner made a discovery. It hasn't been locked anywhere that I can see, but that doesn't mean you didn't see something. Sometimes, they just keep this stuff local for a while, until they have further evidence. One person seeing something doesn't really mean a lot, especially if they didn't manage to get any data on it. It's just my opinion, but I think you might be barking up the wrong tree. If anything big is happening, it's pretty unlikely that a collection of top mathematicians and scientists will be keeping quiet. They want their research shared far and wide so they get more research grants that let them continue their work. Just like we want our articles being shared far and wide so we get more articles published. I guess, if we're talking about the end of the world, maybe they'd keep quiet so not to cause anarchy or something. LOL. But trust me, chick, I've written enough how the world might be end-style articles to know that it's not happening. Not for a long time. And it wouldn't be one big event, it'd be a collection of lots of little shitty ones. Climate change probably being the main trigger. Talking about climate change, that leads me to one of your questions. Christopher LaRue. Yeah, I know a fair bit about him. So, straight off, he's a complete dickhead. Total psychopath. I won't go on about that. I'll just get straight to your points. You might have been able to go with an article intended to rustle up some hysteria, based on what's going on in City Redacted, and LaRue's current top secret project. BOS has been building a spaceship capable of further and faster space travel than ever before. And the tech he's using is top secret, real innovative stuff. Thing is though, he started working on it a couple years ago. So you couldn't make the link between that and what's going on right now in any future articles. Whispers on the street are that this ship is the answer to how we'll survive past climate change. Long time in the future, but not as long as you think. I don't know if you've got kids, but if you have, then they may well be boarding it. I'm not entirely sure why all your regular journals aren't panicking about that end of the world scenario, but whatever. The funny messages you send me sound like a load of bollocks to me. Sorry mate, just sounds like you've got a pissed off student on your hands, decorating the streets with shitty poetry. Probably an ambitious English lit student. LOL. I can't see any link between the messages and anything scientific. Let me know if there's anything else I can help you with. I might not agree with your direction, but it sucks to be blocked. I had it myself last year. It was that bastard LaRue, after I wrote that bio piece on him. I wasn't published anywhere for 6 months afterwards. Nearly lost my house. He's scum. Let me know if I can help you with anything else, okay? I do respect my Australian contact. She's good at her job. I don't think she's right about this though. The thing is, she isn't here in the city, is she? She hasn't got the feel of the streets. I couldn't give her all the details either, so she's drawn a conclusion based on a basic summary I presented to her. I spotted a bit of a link between our situation that she didn't. So she was blocked from being published by LaRue, which caused her to become so financially crippled that she almost lost her house. I've been blocked too, though I don't have any firm evidence that LaRue is behind it. It's seeming more and more likely. Dr. Madden might be powerful, but I can guarantee she wouldn't have the power to block the press from pursuing a hot story. That would take serious money. Most of the time, even if the press are breaking the law, then they'll print something anyway and just remove it once it's had enough views, issuing a rubbish apology at a later date. Blocking everything that has been going on here will have taken serious influence and serious money. Both of which LaRue has. I've got to sign off now, because I'm heading out onto the streets again tonight. The mystery graffiti artist is my best lead, and I think I've spotted a small pattern in his work. One night on, one night off, one night on, one night off. So tonight, will he be on? Let's find out. As before, I'll post when I know more. Ian, didn't you hear the captain calling? Carter asked. I moved my gaze from the notes on my desk and looked in his direction. He was standing by the entrance to my room, hands on his hips. He looked furious and impatient. What's going on? I asked. We have an emergency. HQ wants to send us on a rescue mission. Rescue? Who? I raised my eyebrows. No idea, the briefing's already started. Come on, let's get to the control room. Before I could ask him anything else, he turned and went down the hallway. I arranged my notes neatly and exited my room. The corridor leading down echoed with my footsteps and Carter's own in the distance. The spaceship was big enough for me to still sometimes lose direction, but at least it was equipped with gravitational panels so we could get around more easily without floating and getting disoriented like in the early stages of the simulation. I turned right at the corner and saw Carter stopping in front of the control room door. He turned around and waited for me to get closer. Once I did, he pressed the big square button next to the door, which made it slide sideways. Immediately, we were hit by the sound of murmurs as our other crew members discussed something around the holographic map in the middle. Behind the crew was a row of control panels sitting in front of a huge pane of glass. I glanced at the dark space beyond the glass, filled with hundreds of stars in the distance, unreachable still to mankind. It often made me realize how insignificant we are, and how easily we can get swept away in an instant in this cold abyss, and no one would ever even know. I was shaken back to reality by Captain Adams' stern voice. Ian, late again. Sit down, he said. The crew consisted of 6 members altogether, and we had mandatory meetings every morning and evening to go through the list of inspections. So when Carter called me for an unexpected meeting at 5 p.m., I knew something must have gone terribly wrong. I sat down and waited for the captain to speak. He said, "Earlier today, there was an incident on board the ISS-14. We don't know what exactly happened, but supposedly there are casualties and Earth lost contact with them. HQ wants us to go there immediately and provide rescue to anyone alive."
But that place is pretty far away.
The team medic Riley said.
It'll take us at least a few hours to get there, and we're not rescue services.
Yeah, but there's no one closer to them than us. Now, I know that this is not our line of work, but it has to be us. We go there, look for any survivors, and go back home. Wait, what about the mining operation? James asked. HQ wants us to put it on hold. Right now, the priority is rescuing the ISS-14 crew and escorting them back home. Fine, I'll start the engine, Hank, the pilot, said. He stood up and went to the control panel with Carter, and the two of them pressed a series of buttons. Every crew member was trained to pilot the ship, but only Carter and Hank could do it outside of any emergency situations. The ship hummed to life, the floor under our feet slightly vibrating. The view outside started rotating to the right, making the stars dance across the window. When it stopped, it was impossible to tell which direction we were facing. However, the pilots somehow knew it from the radar, and we were able to determine which direction to move in. The ship started moving forward slowly, but gained speed gradually. It looked as if we were pinned in one spot, but I knew that with each second passed, we covered miles of the inhospitable vacuum of space. There, Hank leaned in his chair. We should be there in about 3 hours. Well, keep your eyes open, the captain said, and try to see if you can get in contact with him in the meantime. He stood up and left the room. I followed and went back to the crew quarters. I closed the shutters on my window and sat down on my bed. Although some of the crew members enjoyed the unique view from the windows in their rooms, I tended to avoid gazing outside, especially if I was left alone with my thoughts. thought of sitting on my bed, I went to join Hank and Carter in the control room. The two of them were casually chatting by the control panel when they saw me join and offered me to join in on the conversation. So I was just telling Carter that the guys on the ISS-14 are probably just blackout drunk. Hank chuckled and craned his neck in my direction. What do you think? I don't know. It's strange to just lose contact like that. They might have had a serious issue, I said. Well, whatever the case, we'll find out soon. We're almost there. See that? Carter said and pointed to the window. I squinted and realized that he was pointing at a dot in the distance. As minutes went by, the dot grew closer and more prominent shapes gradually became apparent. It began to take the shape of a man-made flying object, and I recognized its disproportionately large wings as solar panels reflecting sunlight. It's still there, and it seems still intact, Hank said. He leaned in and pressed a button on the control panel. As he held it like that, he said, "We can see them. Everybody, get down here." In a matter of minutes, everyone was in the control room, and the ISS-14 was a lot closer and bigger, displaying more and more visible details on the structure, like joints, pressurized modules, etc. Adams pressed a button on the control panel and said, "This is the US Collector 03. Does anyone copy?" He released the button and we waited in silence. Nothing but the humming of the ship was heard. Adams pressed the button and spoke again. "This is the US Collector 03. ISS-14. Do you copy?" No response. Adams sighed. "Well, I guess we're going in. Bring us in closer, Hank." "Ian." He looked at me. "Suit up." I gave him a silent nod of agreement and proceeded to the lockers. I donned my suit and put my helmet on. I double-checked if the thrusters on the boots were functioning, refilled the oxygen tank, and made sure everything was tightly secured. Once that was done, I proceeded down to the airlock. Riley was waiting in front and inspected my gear once more to make sure everything was safe.
Alright, you're good to go,
she said, giving me a pat on the shoulder. I pressed the button to open the airlock and stepped inside. In front of me was the second airlock door and a small round window, the final line of defense that separated me from a potentially painful demise. Riley pressed the button again and sealed the door behind me. I attached the safety cord to my suit and pulled down the lever on the left side of the wall. "Depressurizing airlock, stand by," a computerized voice announced. I glanced through the round window facing the interior of the ship and smiled at Riley. "I'll be back in a bit," I said encouragingly. "Airlock depressurized. Opening airlock. Ready." I pressed the button next to the second door. It opened with a hiss, and instantly, everything except my breathing went silent. The weight of my body was lifted, and I was floating mid-air. I used the thrusters to propel myself out of the airlock, and finally stepped into the vast, empty space. That initial moment felt nauseating at first, leaping out of the spaceship and expecting to see ground beneath you, but instead being met with an endless abyss which threatened to swallow you whole. The ISS-14 towered above me now, much larger up close than I suspected it to be, a silent behemoth which took up almost the entire view in front. The docking bay was right in front of me, so I proceeded there as quickly as the thrusters would allow me. Despite being able to go only 8 miles per hour, I didn't worry about the speed, since I had enough oxygen to go for at least 6 hours, so hopefully I'd be back to the ship by then. "Ian, do you copy?" Carter's voice came through the radio. "Yep, loud and clear," I responded. "Alright, listen, we scanned the area with thermals, and there's no sign of anyone being alive on board the station." "What? Are you sure? Maybe the device malfunctioned."
Definitely not, because we picked up a sign of life outside the ship. Repeat that last.
I said.
There's indication that one of the crew members is spacewalking outside the ship. See that gray node just around the upper right-hand solar panel? He should be around there. Roger that,
I said and looked up. Beyond the top of the station was exactly what was under it. Endless, vast void. It was a long ascent, especially because of the speed of the thrusters. But I slowly made my way up. Halfway there, I stopped at the sight in front of me.
Holy shit,
I mumbled.
Ian, you okay?
James asked. I stared in bewilderment, unable to respond. The airlock, which led inside the station, was wide open. That was not uncommon if astronauts went on repair missions which were short. But what bothered me here was the fact that both airlock doors were wide open, letting out all the air.
Guys,
I said.
Something bad happened here. Both airlock doors are wide open.
There was silence on the other end, until Riley simply uttered a dumbfounded,
What?
Probably human error,
I said.
That's impossible.
Adams scoffed.
The system would have warned them tenfold. You would have to be a complete idiot, suicidal even, to make a mistake like that one. Well then, I can't explain this,
I said and continued ascending. Pretty soon, I reached the top and had a good view of the entire station. The place seemed completely undamaged, so it made sense to me that someone simply made a mistake when opening the airlock.
Any sign of survivors?
Adams asked. I scanned the area and at first saw nothing. And then I noticed it. An astronaut, blended with the white exterior of the station, just floating around upside down. He showed no signs of movement, so I assumed he was either dead or unconscious.
I see something. Hold up.
I leaned forward and activated the thrusters once more. As I got closer, I tried to speak into the radio to avoid startling the crew member in case he was still alive.
This is Ian Nielsen. Does anyone from the ISS-14 copy?
As I suspected, there was no response. So I simply said,
We're here to rescue you. Try not to move while I attach the safety cord to you.
I got close enough to the astronaut to grab his hand and turn him around. I saw a man under the helmet, seemingly sleeping peacefully. His forehead and the inside of his helmet had blood on them, and I would have thought he was dead, had I not seen the helmet getting fucked up every few seconds from his steady breathing. He had a name tag on his chest that said Harrington.
I found one. He's alive, but he seems to be injured,
I said.
Alright, bring him back, and we'll decide later what to do with the station,
Adams said. I detached the safety cord from myself and attached it to the astronaut. I held the cord with one hand and pressed the button on it. It began slowly pulling the both of us back towards the ship.
Alright, I got him. We're going back.
I stared at the ISS-14 as it grew distant again, occasionally glancing at Harrington to see if he was still breathing. We had passed by the open airlock, and I kept squinting at it, mesmerized and trying to take a closer look, but it was too dark. When it was out of my line of sight, I glanced back at the astronaut. His eyes were wide open, and he was staring at me. I stared at him for a while, not sure if he was dead or alive, or catatonic. But then, I saw him blink. He started darting his eyes around frantically. I finally broke free of my trance and said,
Hey, it's okay. You're safe now. I'm from the Collector 03. We were sent to rescue you.
Harrington mumbled timidly.
Rescue? Yeah, I don't know what happened, but you seem to be the only survivor. I'm bringing you back to our ship.
At this sentence, Harrington's eyes widened even more, and he started panting. Within seconds, he was writhing and screaming, shouting incoherent words. He almost shook me off the cord, and I tried calming him down, but it was hard with the cacophony of radio voices asking me what was going on and Harrington's screaming and squirming.
Hey, calm down. Calm down.
I tried to hold him still, but it was impossible.
Don't do it. Don't bring them back.
I managed to grab those words among all the incoherence in Harrington's sentences.
There's no one else left of your crew. You're the only survivor.
I shouted, but he continued ignoring me. And then he started coughing violently. Droplets of blood splashed the inside of his helmet, adding to the other already dried blood. He had a coughing fit for about half a minute, and he took a few deep breaths. Then his eyes closed, and he seemingly lost consciousness again.
Ian, report, damn it!
Adams shouted over the radio. It took me a moment to recompose myself, and then I answered.
I think he has internal bleeding. We have to hurry. Riley, get the first aid kit ready.
On it.
Riley responded. Within minutes, Harrington and I were back in the airlock. I pressed the button and closed the external door and pressurized the chamber, putting Harrington in a laying position. Airlock pressurized. Welcome back. As soon as the internal door opened, the crew rushed in and put Harrington on a stretcher, carrying him to the infirmary. I took off my helmet and, with the suit still on, followed them.
Get a suit off.
Riley's voice echoed through the ship. Harrington was laying on his back on a table, Riley on the side of it, taking off his helmet. I got to the other side of the table and helped him take the suit off him. When I reached to help him take his garment off, the astronaut firmly gripped my wrist like a vice. Our eyes met, and again, he had that same petrified look on his face as before. Please don't do it, just get me now. He mumbled something, but I couldn't understand him. I leaned in and told him to repeat what he said. You brought them back, he said with a trembling voice. I looked down in time to see Riley take off Harrington's garment, and an audible scream was heard from her, along with gasps from the other crew members. When I looked down, I could hardly comprehend what I was seeing. Harrington had a gaping hole in his stomach, and in it, hundreds of thousands of maggots were squirming around, eating away at his wound. They started hopping, some managing to jump onto Riley's arm. She screamed and violently swatted at them, making a break for the exit. Harrington started coughing again, more violently than before. Just before he stopped moving completely, the blood from his cough spurted over my suit, and I recoiled. When I looked down, I nearly started screaming. Along with the blood, there were crimson maggots slithering towards my head. I swatted at them, disgusted and in a panic at the same time. Get out of here, Adams shouted. We didn't need any more encouragement. We rushed outside, and once everyone was out, we pressed the button to lock the door. We glanced through the glass on the door at Harrington's body. More and more maggots squirmed out of Harrington's wound, impossibly many to fit into his stomach alone, swarming his exposed body parts and feasting away on his remains. Is everybody okay? Anyone get bit? Adams asked. Most of us nodded. Riley, what the hell was that? James asked, beads of sweat forming on his temples. Riley opened her mouth as if to say something, her gaze still fixated on the infirmary. She shook her head without saying anything. How the hell did he get maggots on him? I asked. Even if he had a necrotic wound, there's no way so many maggots could just come out of his stomach like that. Well, the only explanation is he or one of the crew members were infected and it got out of control, Adam said. Either way, it doesn't matter. We have to get in touch with HQ. He turned around and left the corridor, and everyone else started towards the control room after him. Riley and I were at the back, and she started down the corridor. I grabbed her arm, a little firmer than I planned to. She shot me a look of confusion as I stared at her exposed forearm. Riley, those maggots touched you. Did they bite you? I asked, silently enough for others not to hear.
No.
She said and jerked her arm free of my grip and looked at me as if she was offended.
You think I would just jeopardize the whole crew like that?
I don't. I just...
And what about you? The ISS member coughed up some maggots on you.
I'm clean. I'm positive, I said with our eyes locked. She crossed her arms and seemed to calm down. She said,
Well, we should all get tested anyway. But we don't have the necessary equipment here.
Right, our priority should be contacting HQ and getting back. If any of us are infected, they can quarantine us. She nodded and motioned me to join the rest of the crew. We entered the control room and heard Carter's voice on the other end of the room. This is the US Collector 03. HQ, do you copy?
This is HQ. What's your situation, Collector?
A crackly voice came through the radio. Move aside, Adams commanded Carter and pressed the button on the panel. HQ, this is Captain Adams. We arrived at the site of the ISS-14. Everyone but one crew member died mysteriously. We managed to bring the crew member back on board, but he died shortly after. There was a brief moment of pause before HQ said,
What happened?
We don't know for sure. The crew member we brought back seems to have been infected. He had flesh-eating maggots under his suit. We had to seal off the infirmary, since we don't know the extent of the threat.
Understood, Collector. Right now, your priority is sterilizing the contaminated areas, in case these maggots can do some serious damage to the vessel. Once you've done that, haul ass back to base so we can quarantine and treat you, if necessary. We're sending someone out there right now.
Copy that, HQ. Collector out. Adams turned to us with his typical stern look and said, Well, you heard him. Let's first sterilize the infirmary. Hank pressed the button on the control panel. When nothing happened, he pressed it again. He flipped the switch up and down and pressed the button once more before he started repeatedly slamming it. What's going on, Hank? Carter asked. Hank pressed the button a few more times before responding. The sterilization won't work. Button's not responding. Try some other rooms, Carter suggested. Hank did that and pressed various other buttons, but still no dice.
Shit, now what?
Riley mumbled. Adams sighed and turned to James. He said, James, I need you to put on the hazmat suit and decontaminate the infirmary manually. No fucking way, James rebutted. Have you seen what those angry little fuckers can do? I'm not going in there. You'll do your job. Adams got into James's face before calming down. Besides, the suit will protect you. He then said to Hank and Carter, Start the engine. Might as well get going while we're doing this. He turned around to approach the holographic map on the table when Carter spoke. Captain? The engine won't start. Adams turned back and frowned, now visibly frustrated. What do you mean it won't start? Start it. It won't fucking start, Carter blurted. There was a moment of intense silence in the room. Adams rubbed his chin and then turned to me. Ian, check the engine, but put the protection suit on, just in case. I gave him a silent nod of agreement and left the room. James followed behind me. This is bullshit. He threw his hands up in the air as we made our way to the lockers. Suck it up, James. The sooner we finish our job, the sooner we can go home, I scoffed. We donned our protective suits and inspected each other for potential faults. And once we were sure everything was okay, I picked up my tools and we went our merry ways. My job was to go under the ship's bottom floor and inspect the engine, and to do that, I had to remove the floor panel and climb down. As I did so and entered the corridor, I heard James's trembling voice on the radio.
Jesus Christ. Captain, I'm in front of the infirmary. There's more of them in here. What do you mean?
Adams asked.
I mean, there's millions of them. All over the fucking place. I can't even see Harrington's body anymore. Jesus fuck.
My stomach started twisting into knots. I didn't like this at all. Adams continued.
James, calm down. Listen, we have to decontaminate the room before they spread to the other parts of the ship. Your suit will protect you. Pull the switch, wait until the process is done, and get out. Alright.
James sighed over the radio.
I'm going in.
Adams spoke to me and asked how things were going on my end, and I told him I was close to the engine. It was darker down here, so I used the flashlight to illuminate the way in front. The corridor echoed with the heavy thuds of my footsteps as I made my way through, until I reached the panel above my head, which said, "Do not remove."
James, talk to me.
Adams said.
I'm still okay, Captain, but I had to stomp all over them. It's disgusting. They seem to be ignoring me, though. Did you pull the switch?
I pulled out my screwdriver and started to unscrew the panel off.
Not yet, but I'm almost... Ah! Shit!
James shouted.
James, what happened?
Adams asked.
Something just fucking bit me!
James yelled.
James, that's impossible. They can't get through your suit. It's made out of. There's a fucking hole in my boot. Fuck, I gotta get out of here.
My heart was thumping against my chest rapidly at this point, and I had to stop doing my own job. My left hand frozen on the panel and the other on the screw.
They're in my suit. Oh God!
James shouted.
Get out of there!
Adams shouted loudly. The next few seconds were filled with James's screams over the radio, intermittently getting louder and quieter, until they stopped completely.
James?
I shouted, my own voice trembling now. There was no response, however. Adams shouted again.
Ian, get the hell out of there! Alright, let me just fix the engine. Ian, forget the engine and get back here now! Hold on, if I fix the engine we can...
The panel partially fell open when I took the second screw off, and from the gap, hundreds of red maggots poured through, falling to the ground with wet slumps. I recoiled in fear as the maggots continued to pour out and pile on the ground in front of me. They started bouncing one by one, trying to reach me. I screamed and bolted for the ladder. All the while, the voices of my crew members echoed through the radio, asking me what was going on. I climbed up and slammed the floor panel shut, leaving me with only the sound of my own frantic breathing. And then I heard a thud, and then another, and another. In moments, hundreds of thuds were heard on the panel, like the sound of rainfall. And I could see the floor bending outwards under the pressure. Maggots started crawling from under the edges of the dented panel, and I screamed again, running for dear life.
Ian, respond! Abandoned ship!
I shouted between breaths, looking back behind me. I could already see thousands of maggots on the ground and walls behind me.
What's going on?
Adams shouted.
Maggots! Everywhere! Get to your suits! We have to run!
I ran straight to the locker and took off my protective suit, donning the space one instead. My trembling hands making it difficult to suit up. The rest of the crew members were there in a matter of seconds, putting their own suits on. No time for inspection, get to the airlock, Adams shouted. I ran out first, rushing down the corridor, and stopped when I glanced at the infirmary. James was slumped over the threshold, leaving the door open. He had managed to take his suit off, down to his waist, before he died. Maggots were wiggling inside his empty eye socket, and his teeth were visible due to his lips being completely eaten. His body and the areas in front and inside the infirmary were crawling with maggots, possibly millions, piling atop each other on every single surface of the room, making it look like it was moving with their slithering. Adams pushed me, and I forced myself to look away and continue running. We rushed inside the airlock, and as I turned around, I saw Hank lagging behind, running towards us. His right arm had maggots on it, which he seemingly wasn't aware of. All of us were probably thinking the same thing, but no one wanted to say it. That's why Adams stepped up and closed the airlock before Hank could get inside. Depressurizing airlock, stand by. Hank slammed the button to open the airlock from the outside, but it wasn't responsive during the pressurization.
Captain! Captain, let me in! They're close!
He looked behind at the mass, which drew closer by the second. Hank, I'm so sorry, Adam said. Hank started screaming and flailing his arms. Maggots started appearing in his helmet, and he threw it off, trying to run in the opposite direction in a desperate attempt to escape. He never stood a chance, since the maggots swarmed up to his knees in seconds and trapped him like quicksand before he was completely covered by them. Riley screamed and cried, trying to put her hands on her mouth, but unable to because of the helmet. Opening airlock. The door opened, and all went silent again. Never before has the inhospitable vacuum of space felt so welcoming. For a while, we floated in silence, processing what just happened. And then Adams spoke up. A sentence which sent a chill down my spine so sharply that, for a moment, that I thought that I myself had maggots in my suit.
We need to get to the ISS-14,
he said, somberly. Riley and I shot each other a confused stare, but said nothing. Adams was already well on his way to the airlock of the SS-14, slowly propelling himself with his thrusters. Carter followed closely behind, and soon the entire group of survivors was unanimously headed towards the silent behemoth of a ship.
Captain, there might be maggots in there,
I said through the radio.
I know,
Adams's voice came tiredly through the radio.
But some of us are low on oxygen. We need to replenish it, and if possible, repressurize the station. We need to contact HQ and warn them of the dangers here before those maggots spread.
Even though no one responded, it was clear that we all agreed. After all, we had only two choices: drift around in the vacuum of space until help came, or try to find shelter inside. Both options seemed equally daunting.
What the hell are those things? Space maggots?
Carter asked.
Whatever they are, they can't be allowed to go back to Earth,
Adams responded. We reached the airlock of the ISS-14 and went inside. The entire ship seemed to be dark, so we turned on our belt flashlights.
Should we close the hatch?
Riley asked.
Yeah, might as well. But if the station is infected, we might have a better chance surviving in the vacuum. So be ready for a quick venting,
Adam said, slowly propelling himself deeper into the station. Carter clicked the button to close the exterior airlock door, and once we were inside, he closed the interior one as well. Adams went ahead, the corridor illuminated by his flashlight like a wave of light. We followed him, nervously jumping at every tiny detail on the walls which resembled maggots or seemed like it was moving.
All the doors are open, except the control room,
Adam said.
Yeah, so?
Carter asked.
They may have vented the station from there. Common procedure is that in case any venting needs to be done, all astronauts are to put on their suits and head to the control room. Well, let's see if anyone is inside,
I said. Adams nodded and pressed the button next to the door. A message popped up that said, "Warning, pressure inside the room is higher than the pressure outside. Do you wish to equalize pressure?" Adams clicked on yes. "Equalizing pressure, stand by." The message blinked on and off for a few minutes, and I felt myself becoming heavier gradually as the gravity adjusted, until all four of us were with our feet on the floor. The display turned green as it said, Pressure adjusted. Warning, emergency power online. Oxygen production offline. Please use emergency oxygen stations to replenish your oxygen. The door slid aside, and we were met with the dim red glow of the control room. Immediately, we saw the body of an astronaut lying face down in the corner of the room. Riley rushed to the crew member and turned her to herself, but her look of vague hope turned to disappointment.
She's dead.
The rest of us approached and saw the astronaut's face. It was a young woman, no older than 30, blue in the face, but despite the color of her skin, she looked like she was sleeping peacefully. Her name tag said, Moody. She's holding something, Carter said. We glanced down and saw what looked like a camcorder in her hand. Adam snatched it and opened it, and the rest of us gathered around him. There was a folder open, and Adams highlighted the first video by date. It started playing. The video was from the perspective of one of the astronauts, male, judging by the voice. He was hovering above the ISS and zooming in on something on top of the ship. When he zoomed in enough, it became visible that there was some sort of red egg floating around. If he was saying anything, we couldn't hear him in the vacuum of space. The video cut out, and the next frame showed the astronaut gently holding the object from the previous footage in his hand. The red egg had veiny marks on it, and it was slightly bigger than the astronaut's palm. The astronaut flipped the egg from side to side, examining it curiously. The video ended there. Adams played the next video. The frame showed the egg from before, now in a glass display case inside the station.
What the hell is that?
The person recording, now a female scientist, asked.
No idea.
Another voice responded.
Harrington found it outside, and HQ wanted it brought back.
What if it's dangerous?
The female astronaut asked.
Well, whatever it is, it won't break this case. Nothing can. The scanner shows no signs of activity inside the egg.
A third voice said. The camera zoomed in on the egg before the video ended abruptly. Adams played the next one. This video showed the same room as before, but now the camera was placed on the desk, since we could see Moody sitting by it, facing the camera.
Base wants the egg tested. They don't want to risk bringing the egg to Earth, so I've been appointed as lead scientist. My job is to monitor the egg and conduct tests to see what's inside. So far, there's nothing strange about the egg itself. Maybe it's not even an egg. I'll continue to run tests.
She reached out for the camera, and the video ended. The next video showed the same scene, and a visibly more tired Moody. She rubbed her eyes and faced the camera, before saying,
Another egg was found today. Nelson was performing a module check when he saw it. Despite initial skepticism, the egg will be taken back to base for study. There were apparently more, and all seemed to be coming from one direction. There may be a nest close by. As for this one, there seems to be some signs of minor activity inside. Hard to tell what it is though. Whatever it is, it could be our actual first contact.
She ended the video. I heard Carter mumble, "Oh shit," under his breath. Adams played the next video. The footage showed the same egg from before, but it was now cracked at the top and on the side. Tiny crimson maggots were squirming around the display case lazily.
What are those?
Moody asked.
Alien worms?
A voice next to her asked.
Was the egg rotten?
She inquired.
Didn't look like it. Maybe the worms are supposed to hatch out of it. No idea.
One of the maggots started slithering on the glass, moving upwards. The camera zoomed in, and I clearly saw the bodies of the maggots crawling over each other. It looked like they had tiny hairs on their bodies. The video ended. I felt itchy all over my body, unable to shake the feeling of bugs crawling all over me. The next video showed Moody in the same room. There was visibly a lot more maggots inside the display. She said,
They are reproducing at an enormous pace. The maggots seem to be dormant in the vacuum, but able to survive. Keith followed the trace where the eggs are coming from, and he says he found their nest close by. It seems that this is really going to be first contact. He hasn't responded to our call yet though, so the signal must be bad there.
The video ended, and there was only one more video remaining. Adams played it. The frame was shaky, but we saw what was clearly the room from the previous footages. However, this time the glass display was broken, and there were countless maggots all over the place, covering every inch of the floor and every piece of item and furniture inside the room. The egg inside the display was broken into pieces now, and barely visible from all the maggots crawling over it.
Moody, move!
Someone shouted. Moody panted in panic and pressed the button to lock the door. She pointed the camera left, down the hallway, and thousands more maggots came into view. Moody turned around and ran. A blood-curdling scream was heard somewhere before it was completely silenced. Moody ran inside the control room and turned around. Harrington came into view with his spacesuit. He pressed the button to lock the door from the outside and shouted,
Moody, vent the station.
Wait, what about you and the others?
No time, I'll open the second airlock. Get ready.
He ran out of view, ignoring Moody's plea to stop. Another scream was heard over Moody's radio. She stood in the room, panting in panic and looking over her shoulder.
Moody, do it!
Harrington shouted over the radio. Moody approached the panel in the corner of the room and opened it, revealing a big switch. She grabbed it and held it hesitantly.
Moody, don't! I can't get to my spacesuit.
Another crew member's voice came through.
Do it!
Harrington shouted. Moody was audibly crying by this moment. With hesitation, she pulled the switch down and heard another short-lived scream. The video cut out and came back the following second, showing Moody in a dim-lit room with red light, gasping for air. She pointed the camera towards herself. Tears were streaming down her face. She exhaled with a trembling voice and said,
Oxygen production was damaged. I only have a few minutes left. HQ doesn't know what happened, and everyone else is dead. All of the maggots have been vented out, but the nest is still out there. Whoever finds this, you have to destroy the nest. It's close by. The coordinates are on the wall here.
She pointed the camera at a wall, and we unanimously looked at the numbers on the wall, which were still there. Moody took a few shallow breaths and said,
Also, please send my final message to my sister.
She started sobbing more.
Haley, I'm so sorry. You were right. Space is really bad. I wish I'd listened to you. I'm glad Mom isn't alive to witness this. I'm sorry for being so stubborn. I'll always love you, little sister.
She sniffled and cried before turning off the camera. The four of us stared at the blank screen in silence. Jesus, Carter muttered. So, what now? I asked. Adams sighed and gently placed the camcorder next to Moody's body. We're going to the nest, he said with determination. Whoa, Captain, you can't be serious, Carter said. Carter, you can stay if you like, Adams said and looked at Riley and I. Same goes for you too. Wait for rescue if you like, but I have to finish this. No way, Captain. I'm coming with you, I said. Riley agreed to come too. So in the end, Carter threw his hands up in the air and said he'd come along as well. Alright, then let's fucking do this, Adam said. We replenished our oxygen tanks and found whatever could be used as a weapon. There were no guns aboard the ISS, which probably wouldn't be useful against maggots anyway. So instead, we grabbed lighters, deodorant cans, and pieces of cloth that we could set on fire. Before we knew it, we were back outside in the vacuum of space. Adams led the way, propelling himself through, with the three of us following closely behind.
How the fuck do we even know how this place looks?
Carter asked.
For all we know, it could just be a floating nest and long gone from that location. No choice.
Adams replied.
We gotta find that thing. If not us, someone else will have to do it. We're not paid to do this sort of Carter. If you're just gonna bitch the whole time, then turn back and get the fuck out of here.
Adams shouted through the radio. Carter hasn't responded. We flew in silence for a while, until Riley spotted some tiny object in the distance. It looked round and reddish.
What the fuck is that?
I asked, immediately suspecting to one thing. Adams flew there and grabbed the object, inspecting it curiously. He turned to us so that we can observe it as well.
An egg, just like in Moody's footage,
he said, letting the egg float. Indeed, it looked exactly like the red veiny egg in the video. I saw more details than in the video though. In addition to the bulging veins, there were thin, orange ones on the inside, visible on the surface. It reminded me of the time when I cracked open an egg, and instead of the yolk, saw an embryo of a chick. Adams grabbed his spray can and lighter.
Everybody, back up,
he said. He flicked the lighter on and the flame appeared, moving not upwards like in normal gravity, but dancing in various directions, almost like when blood starts to flow underwater. Adams put the spray can behind the flame and pressed the button. Although we heard no sound, we saw the wave of flame expanding like a torch and setting the egg aflame. Immediately, we saw little maggots wiggling out and going for the captain. But Adams didn't let up with the flame. His face intense with revenge and anger, the flame reflecting from his helmet. He was practically burning them to a crisp. Even after the egg was nothing more than a burnt shell, he continued burning it.
Captain, you got him. Let's go,
Carter said. Adams finally let up, observing his artistic piece of work, before letting out one more gust of flame and then turning around.
Let's go,
he said emotionlessly. We were far ahead of the ISS by this point, a good 20 minutes since we left. The station seemed tiny from here, and we were mere specks of dust floating through space, surrounded by miles and miles of vast nothingness.
Captain, we still on the right track?
I asked. Adams kept quiet for a moment, and then pointed over yonder. Riley, Carter, and I looked in the direction he was pointing, and there it was. Some kind of an object in the distance. It was hard to tell what it was, but it looked rectangular, human-made, and not crude like a piece of rock from space. We started seeing eggs more frequently floating past us, but there were too many to deal with individually, so we just let them be. As we got closer, it became clearer that the object we were seeing was indeed like a cube. Greenish in color, with black lines going along the edges like columns.
Is this it?
Carter asked. It was big, a lot bigger than I anticipated, easily towering over 50 feet on each side. Right in front of us was a rectangle-shaped entrance near the bottom part of the cube object. One egg floated out of there, spinning in the air. Adams pushed it out of the way and illuminated the entrance. It had the same kind of green and black colors like on the exterior, but nothing noteworthy about it. He looked at me and gestured with his head for me to go in. I did as he said, and gasped in awe at what I saw. The interior looked exactly like the exterior, but the greenish lines that went along the walls glowed in color that gave off the vibe of radioactive material, showering me and my crew members in sickly green. I realized that there were eggs strewn about, firmly stuck on the walls in some sort of gooey substance.
What the fuck? This must be the nest. Captain, are you seeing this?
Carter asked. When we got no response from Adams, we shot around to see what was going on. Before we realized what was happening, the exit slid shut and Adams was out of sight, the green glowing brighter now.
Captain!
I shouted. For a moment, there was only silence. And then Adams spoke.
I'm sorry guys. I didn't want to do this. You see, these worms aren't just flesh-eating parasites. The maggots can devour things quickly, yeah, and they can reproduce quickly too. But they are also intelligent beyond our comprehension.
My heart was beating fast at this moment, and I got a really bad feeling.
Captain, open this fucking door!
Carter slammed on the wall, which was previously an open space. Adams continued.
They can get inside the host and devour him from the inside out in a matter of seconds, taking control of the body. You see, Adams wasn't careful enough when evacuating the ship, and the three of you didn't care enough to check him for any marks. I can't allow you to stop this process.
Carter started slamming the door harder, Riley visibly panicking, and I kept glancing around to see if any of the eggs had hatched by any chance. Just then, a voice came over our radio.
ISS-14, this is HQ. Is anyone still alive there? HQ, we're here! We got a situation here!
I shouted into the radio. A moment later, HQ said again.
This is HQ. Is anyone alive out there?
I tried again, along with Riley and Carter, but they couldn't hear us. And then Adams spoke.
HQ, this is Captain Adams of the Collector. There are no other survivors. I'm on my way to you now. Copy that, Adams. We'll stand by.
HQ said. We tried contacting HQ again, but to no avail. Either Adams jumped our signal or it was blocked inside the structure. Just then, I caught something with my peripheral vision. One of the eggs had started to hatch, and maggots were wiggling out of it.
We gotta get out of here,
I said. Carter was still busy slamming the door and trying to contact HQ, unaware of the eggs hatching.
Carter, we gotta get the fuck out now,
I said. He finally realized the severity of our situation, and all three of us started propelling each other through the structure, using spray cans and lighters to burn everything and anything that got anywhere close to our vicinity. We had the advantage of the structure being spacious and the worms not being able to jump around in vacuum, so we were relatively safe, except for the ones that made their way accidentally to us. The structure seemed to wind around as a corridor, eggs and slime decorating most of its interior. I started to lose hope, and I thought this place would become my tomb, leaving my body to float in the vacuum of space for hundreds of years. But then we saw the exit in the form of a square-shaped hole. We propelled ourselves out, turning around only to burn the rest of the maggots that stumbled outside.
Shit!
Carter screamed, swatting at his own hand and trying to grab something, but it was too late. There was already a tiny hole in his suit, letting out a steady gust of wind. Carter grabbed his helmet with both hands. The shocking realization of what he was about to do hit me, and I tried to stop him.
Carter, no!
I shouted, but it was too late. Carter twisted, and his helmet came off. Instantly, his face started contorting into one of palpable pain and changing colors. I tried to put his helmet back on, but he pushed me and threw the helmet further away. You'd think that dying in the vacuum of space is a relatively quick process, but it's not. It's very slow and very painful. Carter convulsed, his face turning blue and bloating, his eyes turning bloodshot for what felt like minutes, until he stopped moving completely and was left floating in the air as a rag doll.
Ian, we gotta go.
Riley sobbed, and I knew she was right. We tried contacting HQ, but it didn't work. So we simply flew back to the ISS as fast as we could. We had to stop Adams, or whatever those maggots controlling him were. After around 20 minutes, we finally got back and saw another ship waiting nearby. We were greeted by the crew members, who needed a few minutes to understand what we were rambling about. When I finally asked them about Adams, they said he already left with the other team. We tried to explain what had happened, but no one believed us. We had to tell them to go and check out the structure for themselves, but to bring flamethrowers. That took another hour, And when they came back with 2 men less, they asked us to tell them everything. Adams had returned to Earth by then. When we got back, we got information that he volunteered to be on the team which is running tests on the alien egg brought back to Earth. Again, they refused to believe our claims that he was being controlled by space maggots. So, we knew we had to take care of things ourselves. It's been 2 days, but Riley and I managed to get to the base. I'm afraid that this will be my last mission though. I discovered a tiny wound on my right hand when I got back to Earth. There is no pain or anything, but something is wrong. I can feel it. First, I lost control of my hand, and now my entire right arm. It's moving, but not by my own action. I can already feel part of my neck doing involuntary movement, so I'm afraid I'm a goner. Adams needs to be stopped and the egg destroyed. Even so, I feel like this is a losing battle that we're fighting. That structure out in space was made by someone or something other than humans. And they put those eggs there for a reason.